Chapter 531. The long-discussed selection of the three individual sword array by the cultivators of Spirit Sword Sect was finally settled. In the end, the one who stood in the human position of the three individual sword array was still Zhang Shang. Although Zhou Ming and Fei Ying had some regrets when they were not selected, they were not reconciled. Because they asked themselves honestly, they could not reach the level of Zhang Shang. In the past 6 months, Zhang Shang's performance was impeccable. It was even awe-inspiring. Zhang Shang, actually, you don't have to do this. Zhou Ming and Fei Ying are both good candidates. You're not the only one. When handing over the diagram of the three individual sword array to Zhang Shang, Ouyang Shang's face finally revealed a look of reluctance. Zhang Shang just smiled and said, "They are indeed very powerful, but after all, they are just replacements. Our opponent is the Demon King, so everything must be done to the best. Only by doing it to the limit can we have a chance of winning. But Emotion Sword uses emotion to control the sword. If you suppress yourself like this, I'm very worried about you. Big brother, you worry too much." Zhang Shang took the diagram and said, "Love is emotion, and the brotherhood between us is also emotion. Perhaps half a year ago I would still be a little confused, but when I made that sword strike, my sword intent became unprecedentedly pure, no longer confused. In the past 6 months I think I have proved this." Ouyang Shang silently nodded. Zhang Shang's cultivation in the past 6 months was indeed enough to prove everything. He was not only diligent but also desperate. According to the normal rotation, he would go out of his body once every 3 days to kill the dead and refine his primordial spirit. However, since the unexpected encounter 6 months ago, Zhang Shang volunteered to change the frequency to once a day, which was completely suicidal. Even Ouyang Shang expressed his opposition to this. However, Zhang Shang was also very stubborn. At least, he completely refused to cooperate with the blind date program that Ouyang Shang prepared for him. "I am wholeheartedly devoted to the sword, so I have no intention of clinging to love." It was difficult to win people's trust with empty words. Therefore, Zhang Shang proved everything with practice. Every time he went out to fight, he would gain something. After experiencing an ambush, his perception ability was a lot sharper. Without the help of his senior brother, he could come and go freely in the black tide. At the same time, by fighting, his cultivation base progressed at an astonishing speed. Of course, this frequent fight was not the key. Under the watchful eyes of his senior and junior brothers, he soon ushered in a crucial moment in the black tide outside the Dragon Palace. Surrounded by numerous undead, he saw his lover from 2.5 years ago, the desert tribe's poison-extracting physician Lu. This time Lu was no longer hidden in the shadows, but openly appeared in front of him. Her appearance and posture were exactly the same as 2 years ago, and even her temperament was as clear and pure as before. The appearance of Lu even made Wang Chenai, who also had a one-night stand with the poison-extracting physician, fall into deep thought. Zhang Shang was a sentimental person, so the shock he received was even greater. His gaze changed in an instant. However, it had become as cold as ice. Just as the demon girl was about to speak with melancholy, Zhang Shang's emotion sword was unsheathed. At that time, everyone in the Dragon Palace who was watching the scene with the spell was shocked by the decisiveness and sharpness of that sword. That was definitely the sharpest sword in Zhang Shang's life. Wherever the sword chi passed, even the water was smashed. The demon girl, who bore the brunt of it, was smashed into a mass of black fog and disappeared in the water bubble with more than 10 heavy armored warriors beside her. From the beginning to the end, Zhang Shang didn't even say a word. That cold and ruthless attitude made people wonder whether he was still a sword cultivator of the emotion sword or not. No, it's not ruthless. After Zhang Shang's primordial spirit returned, he lightly explained, "It's just heartless." Zhang Shang proved himself with unquestionable actual combat. Wang Lu and Ouyang Shang also had nothing to say. After some discussion, it was finally decided to give him the last position of the three individual sword formation, which was the greatest recognition for him. In fact, the strength of Zhang Shang, who had used the emotionless sword, was completely above the other senior and junior brothers. After that, the demon girl never appeared in front of Zhang Shang again. Perhaps she had really been killed by Zhang Shang's emotionless sword. Or perhaps the Demon King didn't have any hope for this trick to shake people's hearts. In short, this matter finally came to an end. However, whenever people saw Zhang Shang's increasingly firm eyes, they always felt a little sad. The failure of the femme fatale plan seemed insignificant to the Demon King, because if one plan failed, there was still another plan. The poison-extracting physician was only one part of the plan. After that, he used all kinds of tricks, constantly infiltrating and attacking in various ways, trying to obstruct the dual array strategy, making Ouyang Shang and Wang Lu tired of dealing with it. Even his own cultivation was often dragged down. According to the best expectation, after 3 years of strategy, in addition to harvesting 73 fresh and hot Taoist King Pill cultivators, the cultivation base of Ouyang Shang and Wang Lu would also advance by leaps and bounds, and they were expected to reach the peak of King Pill. However, in fact, because of the foreign affairs involved too much energy, the two of them were currently only middle-level King Pill, and it was almost impossible for them to go any further in the remaining 6 months. However, there was also a good side to things. The Demon King's tricks just proved that he lacked the means to make the final decision. With the strength of the Demon King himself dealing with a group of juniors whose highest level was only King Pill, he still needed to spend so much effort. This could only show that he had been seriously injured by Fenrir, and was no longer able to do what he wanted. As long as they persisted, when the dual array was launched, it would be the time for the cultivators of Spirit Sword sect to escape and soar to the sky. Under the encouragement of this belief, the cultivators of Spirit Sword sect spent the most difficult last half-year. Half a year passed in the blink of an eye. On this day, the Dragon Palace of Blessed Fountain trembled endlessly. The dark gravel and dust rustled down from above, and the cracks were like the lightning in the sky, constantly cracking on the dome. At the same time, the spiritual veins under the Dragon Palace began to collapse, and the wild surrounding spiritual energy tore the ground and continued to gush out from the cracks. The so-called heaven falling and earth splitting was nothing more than this. The disintegration of the Dragon Palace of Blessed Fountain was very fast, but all of this had long been expected. The cultivators of Spirit Sword sect had been preparing for this day for 3 years. In mid-air of the main hall of the Dragon Palace, Wang Lu, Ouyang Shang, and Zhang Shang stood in a tripartite confrontation. Wang Lu had the Supreme Spirit Root, Void Spirit Root, so he occupied the heaven position. Ouyang Shang had great luck and was blessed by the earth, so he occupied the heaven position. Zhang Shang cultivated the emotion sword, and the essence of man was nothing more than emotion, so he occupied the human position. The three of them occupied their respective positions, using the profound sword intent to command the overall situation. On the ground, the 72 disciples of Spirit Sword sect were scattered, each occupying a vital position according to the design of the 72 Great Termination Array. And in the middle of the array was Fei Ying, the beautiful girl who was the best at array in the golden generation besides Ouyang Shang. Start the array. Along with the girl's clear shout, the cultivators concentrated their attention and opened their mouth in unison. Start the array. In an instant, the rippling ground that was impacted by the tremendous force of the collapsing earth veins suddenly calmed down, as if it was suppressed by an even greater force and couldn't move at all. At this time, the 72 King Pills bloomed neatly, reflecting each other's brilliance. In the past 3 years, due to the situation, most of the King Pill of the cultivators of Spirit Sword sect had various defects such as insufficient color, which was very different from the high-rank King Pill. However, at this moment, under the effect of the Great Termination Array, the luster of each other blended, making up for the defects, and the color of the King Pill gradually became flawless. The Great Termination Array itself was not so magical. However, at this time, by taking advantage of the collapse of the spiritual veins of the Blessed Fountain, the spiritual energy turned into evil energy, and the essence of the entire spiritual vein was absorbed into the Great Array, which could catalyze the 72 perfect King Pill in a short period of time. Start the array. In midair, Wang Lu uttered a long cry. The sword of Mount Kuan was held high above his head. This ancient sword that was born from the thick earth showed an ethereal and boundless aura. Start the array. Ouyang Shang lowered his head and roared. His natal spiritual sword pointed straight down. The sword intent was pure and thick, motionless like a mountain. Start the array. A bizarre and dazzling thought flashed through Zhang Shang's mind. The bits and pieces of his decades of cultivation were fused into a pure sword intent, which was reflected in his sword-like eyes. The 3 individual sword array was officially activated. The three cultivators seemed to have merged into one in an instant, as if there were thousands of incarnations. Each of them was the leader, and each of them was also the foundation. Next, the sword array was connected to the Great Termination Array. Although the number of people in the three individual sword array was smaller, it was like the brain commanding the torso, instantly taking control of the situation. The 72 Great Termination Array absorbed the power of the spiritual veins and evolved into 72 pure king pills, using the endless growth characteristic of the king pill to provide a huge amount of energy. The three individual sword array above their heads allowed the three top sword cultivators with immortal level and quasi-immortal level cultivation methods to work together to use this power to the limit. Start the array. This time it was impossible to identify who the owner of the voice belonged to. It seemed to be a single person, but it also seemed to be a chorus of 75 people. The two arrays that were completely launched released endless power. Under this cry, the blessed fountain dragon palace only persisted for a moment before collapsing. The next moment, the black tide above their heads came crashing down. In the tide there were countless spirits of the dead, which together transformed into a giant beast that seemed to devour everything. However, the blazing sword light immediately lit up the darkness. The three individual sword array switched to the main position. With Heavenly Sword Wang Lu as the core, it mobilized the huge power provided by the 72 Great Termination Array, and blasted out an unprecedentedly strong primal chaos heaven-splitting sword. This sword was both an invisible sword chi and a tangible sword. The cultivators of Spirit Sword Sect only felt a surge of irresistible force, as if they were melting and recombining. In the blink of an eye, the 75 people had jointly transformed into an invincible sharp sword. The tip of the sword pointed straight to the sky, and the sword intent broke through all obstacles. Boom! The primal chaos heaven-splitting sword fiercely collided with the black tide, and the momentum was appalling. The double array strategy was not a secret. The Demon King had long expected that there would be such a decisive battle. Therefore, in advance, he arranged thousands of troops in the polluted water of Blessed Fountain, which included many people with amazing strength. Coupled with the highly toxic sewage that had been brewing for 3 years, the obstacles faced by the cultivators of Spirit Sword Sect were no small matter. However, this pool of highly toxic sewage that had besieged the cultivators of Spirit Sword Sect for 3 years, under the impact of the primal chaos heaven-splitting sword, only resisted for a blink of an eye before vanishing. The spirits of the dead hidden in the water could not even resist the fierce shock wave of the impact and were turned into debris. The heavy water pressure of Blessed Fountain seemed to have disappeared under the impact of the sword chi that split everything. Just a moment ago, they were still in the underwater dragon palace, and the sound of the array was still lingering in their ears. The next moment, the depth of more than several miles was penetrated, and the group of people had appeared in the sky above Blessed Fountain. The road ahead was suddenly clear. Chapter 532. The sky was as dark as ink. The days of not seeing the sun for 3 years did not end with the heaven-shaking sword strike of the double array. The world above the water was still dark. After 3 years, the black tide had been deeply rooted in the savage land and had grown stronger. After leaving Blessed Fountain, what the cultivators of Spirit Sword Sect saw were more and more powerful undead. Tens of thousands of skeletons spread all the way to the horizon along the vast land. In particular, the direction of Spirit Sword Mountain was completely covered by thick darkness. The road back to Spirit Sword Mountain seemed to be impassable. My goodness, we just came out of the dragon pool and then entered the tiger's den. In the 3 individual sword array, Onyang Shang's sigh sounded in the heart of Wang Lu and Zhang Sheng at the same time. The primordial spirits of the 3 people had long been closely connected under the effect of the array, and their minds were interlinked with each other. What a joke! If there really is such an earth-shattering scene, the black tide should have already alarmed Shangjing sect, and Hichu Daoren would have sent people to collect it. Do you think the 9 regions map is fake? This was just an illusory technique that only had the looks of it. Everyone follow closely, we're going home. The 72 cultivators of Spirit Sword Sect under the 3 individual sword array were silent. When the array was activated, they converged their primordial spirits and gave everything to the 3 individual sword array above their heads, ignoring the outside world. Wherever the 3 individual sword array pointed, they would follow. Wang Lu occupied the sky position in the three individual sword array and had the absolute dominance at the critical moment. As soon as he broke through the encirclement, he immediately locked the direction. His sword pointed to the east, in the direction of Spirit Sword Mountain. In this regard, Ouyang Shang hesitated but did not oppose it. He just instantly remembered the other junior brothers and sisters who entered the Savage Land with him. 3 years ago, before the black tide blocked the blessed fountain, there were more than 20 people scattered around the Savage Land. Now he wondered if they were still alive. However, now was not the time to save them. The explosive power of the double array was unparalleled, but it could not be sustained. The sword array would only last for an hour at most before it disintegrated. And after the double array disintegrated, everyone would be exhausted and unable to fight again. The original design of this move was to succeed or die trying. They didn't have any extra time to waste. Break, break, break. Wang Lu commanded the sword array to advance triumphantly. He urged his primordial spirit to constantly issue the edict. Each time the edict was issued, a ripple-shaped primal chaos heaven-splitting sword chi would burst out, smashing everything that blocked the way. After 3 consecutive waves, the sword array had already rushed dozens of miles from the surface of Blessed Fountain. Wherever it passed, there was no enemy. Tens of thousands of undead were turned into ashes by the sword waves. Even the black tide was scattered a lot. The dark clouds in the sky gradually became sparse, revealing the gray sunlight. However, after 3 waves of sword ripples, the resistance in front of them grew stronger and stronger. The undead that had died earlier were just cannon fodder, but more and more elites were gathering in front of them, trying to stop the sword formation at all costs. Break, break, break. Wang Lu did not stop at all. He issued 3 consecutive orders. The momentum became more and more amazing, and the sword waves were more destructive. The huge mountain of carrion cracked under the sword waves, the sinister ghosts disappeared, and thousands of skeletons were crushed into bone powder. It was another unparalleled crushing assault. The sword array was unstoppable. It moved forward for dozens of miles again, which was equivalent to taking a big step on the journey home. At the same time, the enemies in front were gradually becoming stronger. The wild monsters that had been corrupted by the black tide. The ancient devil spirits that had appeared in the dream of the devil spirit. Break, break, break. Wang Lu roared loudly. His primordial spirit madly urged the power of the sword array. The 72 king pills of the terminating earth great array shrank crazily along with Wang Lu's breathing, as if they were cracking. Every time it shrank, the king pill genuine chi would be squeezed out and poured into the 3-talent sword array. It would then be transformed into the heaven-breaking sword chi that was comparable to heaven's retribution. The ancient devil spirits were torn apart in anger and pain. The monsters were dying in ignorance. A few ghost kings that had just appeared screamed and melted away. Although the magical power supply of the 72 great killing array was still abundant, Wang Lu's primordial spirit, after the 9 rounds of eruption, had become indeterminate, flickering and flickering. Switch. Ouyang Shang took a step forward in the sword array and led the entire sword array to rotate. He took the lead and replaced Wang Lu. As Ouyang Shang ascended the stage, the sword formation's movements immediately slowed down. At the same time, it also lost the power to float in the air and fell downwards. Not long after, everyone in the sword formation landed on the ground and landed in a mountain range. At the same time, in the mountains, the power of the black tide was everywhere. Countless demons and ghosts began to poke their heads out. Move! Ouyang Shang snorted coldly. The huge power was no longer highly concentrated and transformed into the sharp sword will. Instead, it suddenly sank and poured into the earth. In the next moment, the sword formation suddenly moved forward, charging forward at an astonishing speed. Their legs didn't seem to move at all, but they moved as if they were flying, unstoppable, because the soil under everyone's feet was churning madly, pushing them forward according to Ouyang Shang's command. In front of them were mountains, so Ouyang Shang shouted, "Separate!" The earth shook and the mountains separated. The mountain peaks that had stood for thousands of years cracked by themselves under the command of the edict, separating into a narrow and long canyon, which was just right for the sword array to pass through. On both sides of the canyon, ghosts and demons of all sizes were eyeing them. In front of them, there were even ghost fireheads that fell from the sky to block the way. These ghosts in the black tide would not listen to the edict of Ouyang Shang, so he once again ordered the mountains. Collapse! The earth collapsed and the mountains cracked. Bottomless cracks bloomed, like the mouth of a giant beast that swallowed all the ghosts on the ground. The broken rocks tumbled down, and the weight of thousands of kilograms smashed the bones of the dead. Ouyang Shang ordered the earth to be used by him, clearing the way ahead. The valleys on both sides isolated most of the enemies that blocked the way, and the momentum of the advance was unstoppable. After rushing for hundreds of miles, Ouyang Shang only felt a burst of heat in his primordial spirit, which had reached its limit. Replace. Zhang Sheng stepped forward to replace Ouyang Shang. As he occupied the main position, the power of the sword array suddenly decreased by a level. Although in the sword array, the power was shared and the primordial spirit was integrated. However, the gap between him and Wang Lu and Ouyang Shang was inevitable. Sensing that the sword formation's aura was weakening, the undead that had been scared out of their wits began to stir again. Chaos. Zhang Sheng's first move was his unique skill, Emotion Sword. The sword chi of Emotion Sword was invisible and quietly penetrated. A moment later, there was the sound of fierce fighting everywhere. The ghosts in the black tide were infected by the sword chi and began to kill each other crazily. As for the cultivators of Spirit Sword sect who were surrounded in the middle, no one cared about them. Zhang Sheng gently smiled and commanded the sword array to move forward. Although the speed was not fast, it was as easy as walking on the ground. After traveling for dozens of miles, Zhang Sheng gradually felt that his primordial spirit was shaken, and his heart was restless. His 7 emotions and 6 desires began to dance chaotically, and it was difficult for the emotion sword to continue. Replace. At this time, Wang Lu had already rested and had been waiting for a long time. However, when he ascended to the main position, ready to fly forward and sweep away all the ghosts and demons with his primal chaos heaven-splitting sword, this homecoming battle finally ushered in a powerful opponent. Good array, worthy of being the famous Golden Generation. A familiar voice, a familiar figure. The person in front of him had a red face and fierce fangs, and was covered in heavy armor. Although his figure was small and thin, he was majestic like a mountain. Every step he took ignited a flame that could burn everything under his feet, and when he lifted his foot, he left behind a piece of scorched earth. The long-lost last demon king finally appeared. Good courage, you actually dare to stand up. You're just an invisible remnant soul, you don't even have a physical body, are you here to die? Wang Lu narrowed his eyes and analyzed the real situation of the opponent in his peak state. However, when Wang Lu's sharp eyes swept across, he found nothing. The opponent's rank was, after all, too high. The complete Demon King was a powerhouse on the same level as the World Destroyer Demon Wolf. His realm might even be above the level of Supreme. Even a wisp of remnant soul was not something that could be analyzed by a mere king pill. However, a remnant soul was just a remnant soul. If he had 1% of his ability in his complete state, he wouldn't need to mobilize hundreds of millions of the dead from the black tide to prevent them from returning to the mountain. Relying on so many miscellaneous soldiers to fight precisely showed that his main body's strength was seriously insufficient. At least, it was not enough to directly compete with the sword array of the cultivators of Spirit Sword sect. Foreign guest, go back to your hometown. As soon as his voice fell, Wang Lu's primal chaos heaven-splitting sword chi went all out. There was nothing that the primal chaos heaven-splitting sword chi could not break, and it also had absolute lethality to the invisible soul. As soon as the sword chi came out, the remnant soul of the Demon King appeared to be drifting in the wind and rain. However, before the Demon King was split by the sword chi, a thick shield suddenly appeared in front of him. The sword chi that was enough to pierce through the sky bombarded the shield, setting off a series of trembling ripples. However, the ripples spread out, and the shield remained as firm as before. Oh! The shield was held on a thick and powerful arm, and that arm belonged to a tall and burly heavily armored demon. Under the helmet with sharp horns on both sides, there was a familiar face. Desert Demon? He's actually not dead? More than 3 years ago, Wang Lu saw that face in the desert. It was a hard-working blacksmith, with infinite strength but simple and honest. Later, at the cost of his life, the power of his ancestor was aroused by the Demon King, and he became the complete form of the royal family of the demon world, and his power skyrocketed. However, not to mention that this kind of atavism would greatly overdraft his vitality. Even after atavism, the blacksmith, whose power was at its peak, had absolutely no ability to resist the primal chaos heaven-splitting sword qi. Let alone King Pil Yuaning. Even a Taoist master of deity stage, if they were not middle level or above, would not be able to withstand the primal chaos heaven-splitting sword qi. And that blacksmith was at most King Pil level. Could it be that in the past 3 years, he had the ability to soar from King Pil to deity stage? But very quickly, Wang Lu's doubts were answered. Behind the blacksmith, dozens of royal family members appeared. They were all desert demons who should have died long ago, and their strength far exceeded that of 3 years ago. At the same time, their auras were connected, vaguely connected by an unknown formation. Just now it was not the blacksmith who blocked the primal chaos heaven-splitting sword qi, but the combined forces of these dozens of demons. Although, even if dozens of people joined forces, they should not be able to match the power of the sword qi. You are not the only one who understands formations, the Demon King said with an irritating smile. Indeed, I, an outsider, only have a remnant soul left. I can't even withstand a casual sword strike from you. So if you have the ability, go past my loyal guards and kill me, as long as you can really do it. Chapter 533. This was an unexpected and fierce battle. The strength of the desert demons was extremely strong. Each of them was comparable to the authentic King Pil of 9 regions. Their individual strength was better than the King Pil soaked in gutter oil of the disciples of Spirit Sword sect. And their array was even stronger. The actions of dozens of people seemed to be disorderly and often inexplicable, but by raising their hands and feet, they could draw great power. In a head-on collision with the combined sword array of Lingjian school led by Wang Lu, they did not fall into a disadvantageous position at all. Every time the two sides collided, it would cause the earth to shake. The aftermath of the sword qi continued to sweep and wreak havoc, which actually dispersed the black tide that shrouded this place, revealing the clear sky. However, the blue sky was soon lost under the violent turbulence of energy. Sometimes a deep night sky appeared. Sometimes lightning flashed, thunder rolled, clouds and mist shrouded the sky, and sometimes the sun shone high. It could be seen how fierce this fierce battle was. Wang Lu stood on the main position of the 3 individual sword array. The more he fought, the more alarmed he became. 3 years ago, when he formulated this double array strategy, he never thought that there would be someone who could compete with the sword array head-on. Of course, strictly speaking, if the Demon King could solve the threat of Fenrir within 3 years and completely recover from his injury, then the complete form of the Demon King was enough to crush everything. In that case, everyone could only go to hell together. However, at present, although the Demon King had not recovered from his injury, his bodyguards were unusually powerful. Are they really just King Pil level? After the fierce battle, Ouyang Shang could not help but ask. Wang Lu replied in a sinking voice, according to the classification of human beings, they are indeed King Pil level, ranging from peak King Pil to low level. On average, they are not much higher than us, and they are still inferior in number. But however, after fighting for a long time, the side of Spirit Sword sect could not gain the slightest advantage, let alone crossing their line of defense to kill the Demon King. Instead, they were forced to slowly retreat by the other side. And this was still led by Wang Lu, who had the sharpest offensive in the 3 individual sword array. When Wang Lu's primordial spirit flickered and needed to be replaced, the situation would only get worse. It's the difference in formations. Fei Ying's voice suddenly came from the link of their nascent souls. She was in the center of the 72 earthly fiend formation, the only node that was closely connected to the 3 great sword formation. Therefore, she could communicate with Wang Lu and the rest. Fei Ying was an expert in formations, and when it came to talent and perception, she was even above the all-round Ouyang Shang. At this time, after a period of observation, she determined that the quality of the formation used by the demons was above their own combined sword formation. The difference in formation, Ouyang Shang suddenly felt that the matter was even more troublesome. This combined sword formation was originally conceived by him and Wang Lu without eating or sleeping, And then it was finally formed after everyone's repair, condensing the wisdom of the golden generation. Although its performance was still inferior to many famous formations of the nascent soul and deity transformation stage, it was already the pinnacle of the king pill realm. The stronger the formation, the better. For example, the legendary immortal slaying sword formation, which could kill immortals in the primordial times, was naturally far superior to the three great sword formation in terms of mystery and power. However, that sword formation could not be used by those who were not at the true monarch level, and was far from being as close to the people as the three great sword formation. At this stage of the king pill, the combined sword formation could be said to be the peak. Unexpectedly, there was always a higher mountain. The formation used by the demons was obviously a level higher. After the battle, it only made people feel tied, and the situation was getting worse. There is a difference in individual combat strength and formation design. This battle is not going to be easy. In the nascent soul link, Fei Ying sighed helplessly. Don't think about it. Leave the battle to us. There will always be a way. Ouyang Shang comforted Fei Ying and then said to Wang Lu, if you can't hold on, let's change people. I see that your nascent soul is almost at its limit. Wang Lu, however, disagreed. Would it make the situation worse if you came up? Right now, with me in the lead, we are barely in a balance. Once we weaken, the situation will immediately snowball, and there will be no turning back. The problem is, won't the situation get worse after you run out of energy? So before I run out of energy, I have to think of some tricks. Wang Lu gritted his teeth. Prepare a suicide team. A suicide team? Ouyang Shang's eyes narrowed. Are you serious? What else? Compete in endurance and wait for them to run out of energy first? I think their situation is much better than ours, so they can't compete in endurance. If we don't use a big move, it's impossible to turn the situation around. Your so-called big move is to let one of your junior brothers and sisters go up and explode the king pill? Or do you have other big moves? Tell me. I can't agree. Even if we can face the sacrifice calmly, this move of yours is too risky. The number of people in our combined sword formation is just right, not one more. Once we explode the king pill, it's equivalent to destroying the sword formation. If we can't shatter the opponent's formation, it's equivalent to suicide. Wang Lu said. There's a gold substitute, Autumn Beam, who can support us. It's fine before the formation, but now that the formation is operating at full capacity, how can Autumn Beam intervene? Once a new person is inserted, it will cause the formation to stagnate. It's also suicide. Oh, in that case, it seems that eldest senior brother has thought of a certain method that doesn't require you to take any risks, yet is stable enough to win? Ouyang Shang was silent for a moment. Let me go up and try. If it doesn't work, you can find someone to explode. Okay, then I'll wait for your good news. After Ouyang Shang went up, the situation did not improve. Of course, it was not as bad as Wang Lu had expected. Although the explosive power was not as heaven-defying as the primal chaos heaven-splitting sword qi, Ouyang Shang skillfully used the power of the earth to deal with the demons. Of course, a large part of this came from the inexplicable blessing of the earth. 80% of his strength was very effective. Ouyang Shang relied on his extraordinary performance to barely maintain the situation. Unfortunately, even when his primordial spirit was boiling and he could not fight anymore, he could not find an opportunity to turn the tables. After Ouyang Shang retreated, it was Zhang Shang's turn. But facing this emotion sword cultivator, it was really hard for anyone to have much confidence. Zhang Shang's performance was indeed very outstanding, but he could not compare with Ouyang Shang and Wang Lu. Therefore, at the same time he went up, Wang Lu was already prepared to choose a suitable king pill from the 72 Earth Fiend formation to explode. But at this time, the demon formation also began to decline from prosperity. Not only did the output of the demons in the formation begin to gradually decrease, they also appeared a little stiff when changing the formation, and their flexibility was not as good as before. And in a stalemate, this change was particularly eye-catching. Because what was needed to break the stalemate was precisely this little change. Wang Lu looked at the change in the situation in front of him in confusion. Could it be that the demon's endurance is really not good? The validity of the formation has already passed? Ouyang Shang was also puzzled. Or does the emotion sword have a special effect on these desert demons? Or, the two of them could not figure out the mystery for a while, but they were not particularly obsessed with this problem. Now what they had to do was to fully support Zhang Shang as the leader and exert the power of his emotion sword to the extreme. And Zhang Shang would not be distracted to think about other things. Instead, he was completely immersed in the emotion sword. The tangible sword in his hand was waved with all his strength, guiding the King Pill True Qi into invisible sword Qi, which burst out after being entangled by the emotions brewed in his immortal heart. Chaos. The sword of confusion and confusion. When the sword was released, the edge of the sword was erratic, like the broken moon in the water. The demon shield guard in front of the formation only felt a blur in front of his eyes, and the arc-shaped sword Qi had bypassed his heavy shield and struck his shoulder. The heavy armor offset the sharpness of the sword Qi, but the confused emotions still penetrated in. The emotions entangled his heart, causing the demon to suddenly be stunned on the spot. In a split second, the demon's heart was filled with confusion. Countless forgotten scenes flashed before his eyes. The arduous but simple life in the tribe, the daily blacksmithing practice, the secret feelings he had with his childhood sweetheart. Until the awakening of his ancestors' bloodline, the old life was torn apart. Why do I have to fight? Even if I win against the person in front of me, can everything I hope come back? The bewilderment of the shield guards caused the entire demon array to become sluggish. Zhang Shang immediately stepped forward, taking advantage of the victory to pursue and attack. However, the demon array also changed very quickly. Hundreds and thousands of shadow spears stabbed out like a storm, forcing Zhang Shang to place his sword horizontally and use his bluntness to prop up his sword defense to block the spears. When Zhang Shang found a flaw in the demon's offensive, the opponent's formation had changed to another person. It was a butcher with the same tall and burly figure and burning flames in his eyes. With him as the core, the demon formation became blazing hot, and Zhang Shang's confused emotions were burned out in an instant. Zhang Shang took a deep breath and operated his immortal heart. The confused thoughts in his heart were swept away, replaced by blazing fighting intent, as if a flame was ignited. Burn! After the red sword Qi shot out, it turned into a sea of fire, adding another fire to the blazing demon formation, adding oil to the fire. Roar! The bloodthirsty butcher's only rationality was burned away, and his tyrannical killing intent was unstoppable. He left the formation and launched a surprise attack. The blood-stained axe and machete pointed straight at Zhang Shang, his killing intent like a sea. Zhang Shang retreated behind the scenes at this time. Wang Lu, who was already prepared, walked to the front of the stage, and the primal chaos heaven-splitting sword Qi that was full of power erupted. Half of the butcher's body melted like snow and was completely annihilated under the primal chaos heaven-splitting sword Qi. Without the protection of the formation, the demon's single combat power was vulnerable in front of the combined sword formation, and Wang Lu's attack succeeded, so he took a step back and gave up the main position. Zhang Shang took a breath and immediately replaced him. When he attacked, the sword intent was cold and bone-piercing. Sorrow. When the butcher was executed and the demons were shocked and mourning, Zhang Shang's sorrowful sword fell just at the right time. The sorrowful sword intent was like a heavy snow falling from the sky, sweeping through the hearts of every demon and freezing all emotions. The whole formation stagnated, and the rock-solid combination suddenly became scattered. This time there was no need to change people, because Zhang Shang had already brewed the sharpest sword intent to perfection. That was the sword with the most destructive and lethal power among the emotion swords. Under full force, its power could even compete with the primal chaos heaven-splitting sword Qi. And if it fell into the demon race's war, it only needed one strike to decide the outcome. However, at this time Zhang Shang suddenly felt his primordial spirit tremble, and the sword intent that was brewed to perfection was slightly scattered. It was not his own problem, but the supply of magical power from the 72 Earth Fiend Great Array began to waver. The combined sword formation produced a chain reaction, and his emotion sword was also greatly affected. What? Time. Wang Lu replied in a muffled voice. Time. Zhang Shang suddenly realized that the time was about to come. The combined sword formation could only last for an hour. Previously, the three-talent sword formation had taken turns to display its might, continuously advancing hundreds of miles, crossing more than half of the way home, and then fighting with the resurrected devil clan. The time had finally come to an end. Chapter 534. In the design of the double array strategy, they did not consider how to change their moves when they encountered a well-matched opponent. Relying on the combination sword array, the cultivators of Spirit Sword Sect could obtain the combat power comparable to a Taoist Master of Deity stage within an hour, which was a shocking increase in combat power by 2 levels. In order to achieve this goal, the cultivators of Spirit Sword Sect had paid a painful price in the past 3 years. Everything was to obtain the crushing strength advantage of a Taoist Master of Deity stage. Deity stage might not be the top fighting power in the entire 9 regions, but it was more than enough to face the remnant soul of the Demon King. Of course, if the opponent was so powerful that even a deity stage cultivator found it difficult to win, then it was also fate, and nothing could be said. Unexpectedly, although the real Demon King did not have the power of deity stage, he had a group of subordinates whose strength was comparable to that of deity stage. Almost the same idea as the combination sword array, the Demon King relied on a group of desert demons whose highest cultivation base was only Peak King Pill to block the combination sword array of the Golden Generation. Now, an hour was about to pass, and the 72 Great Killing Array had been on the verge of collapse. Starting from the weakest King Pill, there were people who could not keep up with the change of the Great Killing Array. It was not that they lost their fighting spirit, but after being frequently squeezed, the King Pill was on the verge of collapse. It was difficult to meet the minimum demand of the Great Killing Array, and they might be expelled from the array at any time. Once the 72 Great Killing Array collapsed, even if Wang Lu and Ouyang Shang had great ability, it would be of no use. The 3 individual sword array would be like water without a source. But until this time, the Golden Generation still could not break through the defense of the demon race. It seems that I have won this round. The voice of the Demon King came faintly, and his playful and complacent posture was particularly irritating. The combination sword array had not completely disintegrated. At present, it still had the power to make a blow, but it was on the verge of collapse. Whether this last blow could be made or not, it really depended on many people's thoughts. If there was even a little bit of relaxation, the sword array would collapse. Before the array was on the verge of disintegration, the perception shield of many disciples was lifted, and they could be disturbed by external objects. And the mental resistance of the King Pill was also the weakest. A few words of the Demon King had already set off waves in the hearts of many people. However, right at this moment, in the Great Earth Fiend formation, Fei Ying exclaimed in surprise, "There's a flaw in the demon's formation." As she spoke, she used the connection between the Great Earth Fiend formation and the 3-talent sword formation to transmit her discovery to the 3-talent sword formation through the primordial spirit link. In an instant, in Zhang Shang's field of vision, a dot in the demon's array became as red as blood, which was the unique mark of Fei Ying. The one that Fei Ying had marked out was a short and small demon. His performance in the previous battle was mediocre, but now for some reason, he was drifting away from the entire formation, immediately revealing a small flaw. Fei Ying pointed out that point, and then her voice passed through the heart of every disciple of Spirit Sword Sect. Don't listen to his rampant words. In fact, the demon race is already an arrow at the end of its flight. They can't even maintain their own array, and began to show flaws. As long as we destroy that weak point before they can regroup, we can take the opportunity to break through the defensive line and attack the root of the problem. These words immediately stabilized the morale of the army. Understood. Zhang Shang took a deep breath and then fully operated the King Pill in his Jade Mansion. His immortal heart was full of killing intent. Dying Heart Sword. At this stage, Zhang Shang's strongest killing move was ready to be launched. Time was of the essence. Zhang Shang had no time to exchange places with his 2 senior brothers, and Wang Lu and Ouyang Shang also had no intention to compete for the main position. Judging from the situation just now, Zhang Shang's emotion sword had the most obvious restraining effect on the demon race. Although the principle was unclear, now was not the time to delve into the principle. I'll accept this fruit of victory, Zhang Shang silently said in his heart, and then his dying heart sword went all out. At the last moment, the combined sword array burst out with amazing power. The disciples of Spirit Sword sect had already ignited their innate vitality, desperately supplying it. Under the full power eruption, the dying heart sword instantly rushed into the core of the opposite party's array, and then pierced into the chest of that short and small demon. The sword strike was so ferocious that the entire devilish battle formation was completely destroyed by the shockwaves. The short devilish being bore the brunt of the attack, and most of his heavy armor had been disintegrated by the shockwaves alone. The helmet covering his entire face had fallen off, revealing his true appearance. It was a delicate but pale face. All of a sudden Zhang Sheng slightly trembled. "Lu, is that you?" Zhang Sheng spat out a soft questioning voice. However, the other party could no longer respond to him. After being pierced by the dying heart sword, the former poison-extracting physician lost her vitality in a flash. There was a trace of astonishment on her face, and she didn't even have time to say her last words. "What a pity." Zhang Sheng sneered inwardly. "If I didn't have that accidental encounter with you half a year ago, I might have suffered a big blow at this time, and then implicate everyone. As a cultivator of emotion sword sect, Lu is indeed my lifeline, but unfortunately, you guys exposed this card too early. Yes, until today I still can't let go of my love for Lu. But I also know that the real Lu has died 3 years ago. Now this one is just a walking corpse that was awakened by the Demon King. Because if it's the real Lu, she would never stand on the opposite side of me at this moment. And I will never waste my feelings on a pile of meat. That would be disrespectful to the real Lu." With a bit of determination, the power of Zhang Sheng's dying heart sword went up another level. It pierced through the corpse, swept away the demon's line of defense, and went straight to the Demon King's body. As long as this sword hit the target, the battle would be over. At the last moment, Zhang Sheng found that time seemed to slow down. Perhaps it was because when the dying heart sword was fully used, his primordial spirit operated beyond its limit, or perhaps it was the Demon King's final struggle. Although he was a remnant soul without a body, his essence was still the primordial spirit of a supreme-level powerhouse, and perhaps he could affect other people's perception. But this was just a meaningless struggle. No matter how he interfered, Zhang Sheng's dying heart sword would not waver even a little bit. "What a pity." The Demon King's voice sounded faintly. "She's the only survivor that I managed to preserve her soul intact. I wanted to say that if you could defeat me, I would grant you a happy ending. I didn't expect my painstaking efforts to be ruthlessly destroyed by your sword." Zhang Sheng was stunned, and then his heart began to shake uncontrollably. "Don't listen to him." Wang Lu snapped. "Dead men tell no tales. It's not worth wasting energy." "Dead men tell no tales? Ha ha ha, you're just deceiving yourself. If she wasn't deeply in love with you, how could she disobey the order 6 months ago and secretly go to meet with you? This trump card should have been kept until the end. She loves you so much that she disdains everything. She would rather abandon her own people to hinder you in the battle array. Otherwise, how could my perfect battle array turn from prosperity to decline so early? If you are not blind, can't you see the problem with that array? Unfortunately, your strength is too weak. Even with the help of a traitor like her, you can't win, so at the last moment, she had to take the initiative to jump out and become a flaw. From the moment she resuscitation 3 years ago, she made up her mind to sacrifice herself to help you. And you, the human who once pledged eternal love with her, and was willing to live and die together, finally stepped on her corpse and walked in front of me. Zhang Sheng's body trembled violently, and his sword chi scattered uncontrollably. "That's right, you've won. My perfect battle formation has been broken, and no one can stop you anymore. So enjoy the fruits of your victory, human. The fruits that are watered by the blood of your loved ones must be exceptionally beautiful." Boom! Zhang Sheng's state of mind was in chaos, and the perishing heart sword collapsed. Damn it, I knew that people in heat are unreliable. At the critical moment, Wang Lu stepped forward bravely and stood in the main position against the repulsive force of the 3-talent sword array. The primal chaos heaven-splitting sword chi rolled out a huge vortex, sucking all of Zhang Sheng's scattered sword chi into it, and turning it into his own to continue to stab this victorious sword. Who cares whose corpse he stepped on, whose blood watered the fruit? Zhang Sheng, this affectionate person, will be tricked by your tricks, but I won't. However, without the cooperation of the people in the three-talent sword array, Wang Lu was trying to control the full burst of energy of the combined sword array with his own strength. For a moment, the overload operation made Wang Lu's king pill shake violently. Cracks appeared, his limbs and bones creaked, and his 7 orifices constantly overflowed with blood. And the primal chaos heaven-splitting sword qi, which inherited most of the power of the perishing heart sword, had become as heavy as a mountain, and for a moment he couldn't attack. Together, Ouyang Shang exerted all his remaining strength and stepped on the human position, forcibly replacing Zhang Shang, whose mind had already collapsed. And on his original position, there was another Ouyang Shang maintaining the array. This was the 5-element secret technique in pure earth reincarnation, which was far from being able to display with his realm. In theory, this secret technique could only be displayed by someone with deity transformation cultivation base, but Ouyang Shang gave it his all when fighting for his life. His identity as the son of Providence played a magical effect. The ground under his feet suddenly surged with a force, supporting him to release this secret technique perfectly. The so-called Great Providence, its magical effect was at its peak. With Ouyang Shang stabilizing the three-talent sword array, Wang Lu suddenly felt the endless support of power, and the sword qi in his hand became handy again. "Oh, the Providence thing again?" The Demon King sneered. "I've been waiting for you for a long time. Ridiculous Providence, break for me." Boom! As soon as the Demon King's voice fell, Ouyang Shang felt the king pill jump fiercely, and then the impure earth reincarnation shattered with a loud bang. The human position was immediately empty, and the three-talent sword array was directly broken. The strong backlash affected Ouyang Shang and Wang Lu at the same time, and the two of them spurted out blood at the same time. And Wang Lu clearly heard the sound of his king pill shattering. Under such circumstances, the shattering of the king pill was almost certain death, but Wang Lu maintained an unusual calmness at the last moment. His every action was still under control. Although there was not much time left, it was just enough for him to complete his mission. At the last moment, Wang Lu exerted all his remaining strength and directly detonated the primal chaos heaven-splitting sword qi that was out of control. "Let's die together." Chapter 535. The sound of water dripping could be heard in the darkness. Wang Lu woke up and opened his eyes. In the darkness, there was only a hazy figure standing in front of him. Although the figure was blurry, the outline was vaguely discernible. Wang Lu said in surprise, "Eldest senior brother, it's you?" After a pause, he asked again, "We're still alive?" The figure in front of him was silent. In the darkness, there was only the rhythmic sound of water dripping. Shay. Could it be that we're already dead? Seeing that the other party did not answer, Wang Lu vaguely understood. After a moment of silence, he lay down with his head up, disheartened sigh. "I thought that with this hard work, I could go against the heavens and change my fate." "You can indeed go against the heavens and change your fate. You have already gone against the heavens and changed your fate." Ouyang Shang's voice sounded, so Wang Lu jumped up. You're not dead?" Before his voice fell, Wang Lu suddenly felt a strong sense of weightlessness. His body involuntarily fell down, and in the darkness below, a spot of light rapidly expanded. In the blink of an eye, Wang Lu found himself lying in an unfamiliar valley, surrounded by bare rocks, without the slightest vitality. The darkness above his head was rolling, the black tide shrouded. The power of the darkness was abnormally strong, making people feel suffocated. Strange, was the conversation with eldest senior brother just a dream talk? Then how long have I been asleep? Did the last sword strike have any effect? It stands to reason that when the primal chaos heaven-splitting sword qi erupted, even a peak nascent soul stage cultivator would die at the closest position, let alone the Demon King, who only had a remnant soul left and had no ability to resist. But, however, Wang Lu's theory was only applicable to the creatures of the known world. It may not be so applicable to the extraterrestrial visitors. And judging from the intensity of the black tide above his head, during the time he was asleep, the black tide not only did not dissipate, but instead became more and more intense. What happened after he fainted? Just as Wang Lu was about to explore further, the sky above his head burst into a deafening sound. Kacha! The sky shattered and a deep crack was torn open. Energy surged in the depths of the crack, and blazing flames and blood suddenly rained down. Countless demons and ghosts surged out from the crack, greedily thirsting for everything outside the cave. What are these things? Wang Lu looked at the scar in the sky with extreme shock. His intuition told him that it was like a gate leading to hell. Now that the gate was open, the demons were about to sweep through the 9 states. The fiendish demons in the crack were all of a species that they had never seen before. Their talent and potential were indeed impeccable, especially the first-line talents such as Fei Ying Zhangsheng, and the others who were not far from Ouyang Shang. As the elders said, in the Golden Generation, most of the Heavenly Sword Hall members in the later generations were second-rate. However, judging from the actual performance, the second-rate evaluation was too modest. Take Feng Yin as an example. From shoot-on stage to peak deity stage in 100 years, and his real strength was even above deity stage. This achievement was the best in the entire 9 regions. In the Golden Generation, perhaps only Ouyang Shang was expected to achieve such a breakthrough in 100 years. Moreover, the performance of Wang Wu was also puzzling. 100 years ago, she was just a girl with absolute dedication to immortal cultivation. Whether it was strength or temperament, there was a huge difference between her and the later generations. However, these differences were erased in the history, which made Wang Lu feel great regret. And now it was finally time to reveal the secrets that had been troubling him. Then the next step was to quietly watch the real history. In the sky, the elders of the Lingjian school confronted the Demon King. In terms of comprehensive strength, the Lingjian school had the absolute upper hand. There were 3 supreme-level people in the team, and the one in the lead had a faint aura of an immortal treasure. The Demon King, who had half of his body bitten off, was far from his opponent. The Demon King had long been aware of this. If you want to kill me, any one of you can do it. You don't have to hide that immortal sword, I can see it. In order to kill that hungry wolf, I have paid a heavy price, so I am indeed not your opponent. But now, even if you kill me, it's useless. The passage has been opened, and the sky is about to collapse. No one can save it. When the elders of the Lingjian school heard this, they were startled. They looked up and saw that the crack was so deep that they couldn't see the bottom at a glance. It seemed to really lead to an unknown world. Shay. I've long heard that there are 3,000 worlds, and 9 regions is just one of them. But there should be an insurmountable barrier between the worlds. Unexpectedly, it was actually broken by people. The current sect leader of the Lingjian school looked up at the depths of the passage, and his equally deep eyes had already seen the other side of the passage. After a long time, he sighed. If I had known this earlier, I wouldn't have concealed the news of the change in this place for a moment of gain and loss. Now that Lingjian school has suffered the bitter fruit of their own suffering, there's nothing I can say. Senior brother, why do you say such discouraging words? Behind him, an elder with a curly beard laughed. From another perspective, if this matter succeeds, it will be a great merit. Even if all of us die here, the position of one of the 5 uniques in the Lingjian school will not be easy to come by. Well said. The sect leader's eyes shone, and then he stepped forward to the crack and put his hand into the passage between the 2 worlds. Behind him, the elders took out their flying swords one after another and pushed their strength to the limit. The Demon King was taken aback. You guys, seeing the plan of the elders of the Lingjian school, the face of the Demon King instantly turned gloomy. Don't even think about it. He stretched out his remaining left hand, and a dark mountain rapidly rotated in his palm. However, at this time, the Azure Dragon rushed straight over and interrupted the summoning of the Demon King's mountain with absolute brute force. Evil creature! Get the hell away from me! The mountain in the Demon King's left hand was melted by the flame into blazing lava, and then pressed directly on the Azure Dragon. However, the Azure Dragon ignored the injury and struggled to entangle the Demon King. During the time when Azure Dragon delayed the Demon King at the cost of his life, the elders of Spirit Sword Sect, with amazing decisiveness, formed a huge and complex array. It was a terrifying array with a number of Supremes as the core, the sect guarding immortal treasure as the sacrifice, and the spiritual power of the Feng Shui line of Blue River region as the bait. Repair the heavenly deficiency. The sect leader of Spirit Sword Sect unleashed his original immortal sword. a clear flying sword which had been passed down for thousands of years and was said to be bestowed by the upper realm, melted in the light. With this as the guide, a sword light went straight to the sky. A moment later, the sky was full of bright stars, and the black tide that covered the sky disappeared like rain. The stars were like a waterfall, and millions of light spots came from infinitely far away. The earth cracked and a deep light bloomed from the cracks on the surface, like the light from the earth's core. The elders of Spirit Sword Sect displayed their respective methods in the light, and one after another, projected their well-tempered jade mansion. For a time bejeweled jade mansions formed a forest, which was beautiful, but soon melted in the light. Do you think you can stop me like this? The Demon King, who was firmly entangled by the Azure Dragon, constantly released his demonic power from the crack, trying to prevent the completion of the heavenly deficiency array. However, compared with the formation of the array, his personal power was insignificant. If I can open this passage once, I can open it a second time. Your sacrifice is doomed to be meaningless. However, more and more light gathered around the crack, like an insurmountable barrier, blocking the passage. The elders of Spirit Sword Sect were unmoved. Join us. The Demon King whispered, you don't know who the opponent you are going to face is. Everything you're doing now is just like a mantis trying to stop a chariot. But I'll give you a chance. Join us and become one of us. You will have power far above that of 9 regions. Ha ha ha. The answer of the elders of Spirit Sword Sect was a burst of laughter, as if they didn't care about life and death. You? The Demon King angrily said, if you dare to destroy my cause, I will kill your disciples at all costs. Even if I will eventually die here, your Lingjian school will vanish forever. Then my Lingjian school will be immortal forever. Ha ha ha. The last scene that Wang Lu saw was a sea of light that completely submerged the crack in the sky. When the light dissipated, the sky was clear, but the Demon King's face was pale and his whole body was trembling. Chapter 536. From Wang Lu's point of view, there were some problems with the previous generation of Spirit Sword Sect elders. Clues could be seen from the management trainee program. It was rare for a poor and weak sect to be able to gather so many talented disciples at a certain point in time. If it were any other sect, they wouldn't even have enough time to take good care of them, but they had the guts to throw all their disciples into the savage land to experience the test of life and death. It was like pulling seedlings to help them grow, beautifying them into jade that wasn't cut and polished. To put it nicely, this was ambition and full of courage. To put it bluntly, this was simply disregarding human life. Of course, considering that Wang Lu himself had also used the Heaven Burning Blood technique to develop the Wisdom Sect, he would not comment on the fact that Wang Lu treated human life like grass. However, there was no doubt that in the eyes of this generation of Spirit Sword Sect elders, the lives of the disciples were not the first priority. In contrast, revitalizing the sect was the real core task. Revitalizing the sect was, of course, a good thing. From the perspective of the manager, as long as the pros and cons were weighed, it was understandable to pay a certain price in exchange for the success of the sect. As for the failure of the management trainee program, the elders could not be blamed for the strategic mistake. Who could have expected that the savage land, which had been peaceful for thousands of years, would suddenly have a great demon king from an unknown world? However, at this moment, witnessing the elders of Spirit Sword Sect who were like moths flying into the flame to patch the heaven deficiency, as well as the last moment of the great Spirit Sword Sect's heroic words of immortality, Wang Lu's view on them was completely clear. This group of guys was not just a problem, they were basically sick. Perhaps it was because they grew up in the era when the survival pressure of the Lingjian school was the heaviest, and the situation was the most difficult, so their dedication to revitalizing the sect had reached the point of resentment. They did things regardless of the cost, regardless of the consequences, and completely lacked foresight. First of all, they concealed the change in the savage land. The elders obviously did not want the Wanxian League to know that the management trainee program of the Lingjian school had released a fierce beast from the demon world, and they intended to deal with it by themselves. By the time they discovered that the opponent's strength was far beyond their imagination, and that the crisis brought about wasn't something that the Blue River region alone could withstand, it was already too late. As for sacrificing the lives of all the elders to make up for the lack of heaven, it seemed solemn and stirring, but in fact it was without a plan. Before the crisis was over, if they all died, who would shelter Ouyangshang and the other disciples? Did he expect them to fend for themselves? The last sentence about being immortal was even more inhuman. The sect existed because of the people. If the people were all dead, what was the use of leaving an empty reputation? But no matter what, he was already dead, and there was no point in whipping his corpse. The living only needed to think about how to survive. For example, Ouyangshang and the others had to consider how to survive under the wrath of the Demon King. It was not that there was no chance. The news that the Lingjian school's elder team had been completely annihilated would soon be known by others. After all, it was one of the 5 uniques of the Wanxian League. It was impossible to hide the fact that the higher-ups of the Lingjian school had disappeared. Furthermore, the disciples who stayed behind to guard the school did not receive any orders to conceal the news. Once the outside world learned of the news, there would naturally be foreign aid. This process would not be too long, at most a few months or a year. However, for the golden generation who had to survive in a desperate situation, one more day was a great torture. The crack in the sky had disappeared. The demons and monsters no longer appeared, and even the black tide had been dispersed. However, the demons in the savage land were still wreaking havoc. Although the power of the Demon King, who was severely injured by Azure Dragon, was greatly reduced, he still had an overwhelming advantage against a group of disciples. Moreover, the Demon King had an unusual obsession with the Golden Generation. For a demon who volunteered to open the passage to another world to invade 9 regions, since he could not achieve his biggest goal, then what he could do was to kill the talents of 9 regions as much as possible to weaken the strength of 9 regions. Under such a situation, the Golden Generation suffered heavy casualties. It was so heavy that Wang Lu could not even look straight at it. In the time travel timeline, because of Wang Lu's activity in the desert, the Demon King's plan to open the crack in the sky with the black tide was directly cut off, so that the story directly entered the second stage. Later, Wang Lu worked hard for 3 years and finally perished together with the Demon King. Although he sacrificed himself, he kept most of the others. Everything seemed to be very smooth. The tragedy of 100 years ago was just a heavy story, and there was no intuitive understanding. But now there was. In the time travel timeline, Ouyangshang and the others failed to stop the resuscitation of the Demon King in the desert. They did not even fully realize the hidden crisis in the desert and let 10 years slip away. Thus, the Demon King completely recovered. After a fierce battle, the demonic wolf Fenrir was killed. In despair, only a trivial fire was left, and the Demon King was left with an injury that could not be recovered for the rest of his life. Then the Demon King absorbed the huge magic power of Fenrir, and with the black tide, tore the sky and opened the passage. During this period, Ouyangshang and the others tried to stop it, but it was useless. They wanted to send a message back to the sect, but the way back was blocked. Fortunately, there were elders of Spirit Sword sect who were good at divination. After noticing the abnormality, they led the crowd to come, so that everything was not irredeemable. However, the Golden Generation was already irredeemable. In the valley of the northern mountain, 2 girls in the uniform of Lingjian school were cautiously moving forward in the valley. Their clothes were ragged and their appearance was in a mess, but their eyes were firm like well-tempered steel. It was He Yu and Qing Shuang. He Yu walked in front and was observing a towering ancient tree with rapt attention. She stretched out her hand to stroke the rough trunk, and after a long while, she frowned and said softly to the person beside her, "The marks left here 3 days ago have completely disappeared. The demon race has been here, we have to move our position." Behind He Yu, a slender girl with slightly immature eyebrows said in surprise, "We have to move again? No, it's not easy for us to find a broken spiritual vein, which can barely be used for cultivation." Qing Shuang, that's enough. Is cultivation more important than life? He Yu raised her eyebrows, which made the girl named Qing Shuang shut her mouth. The next moment, He Yu suddenly trembled, her face turned unnaturally red, and then a mouthful of blood sprayed out. "Senior sister? The tree is poisonous, I was careless for a moment." He Yu reluctantly finished her sentence, and then her right arm melted like a burning candle. He Yu was obviously no stranger to this scene. She smiled sadly and put her hand on Qing Shuang's shoulder. The king pill in her jade mansion fiercely rotated, and her original true qi was continuously transmitted out. I'll leave everything to you. Go find Big Brother and then survive, including my share. Qing Shuang held back her tears, nodded firmly, and then operated the king pill to accept he used true qi. The movements of the two seemed to have been practiced many times. After a while, Hiyu had been turned into a pool of dirty blood by the red blood poison. Qing Shuang knelt on the ground and cried silently. But after a moment, Qing Shuang wiped away her tears and stood up. On a gravel hill, Lu Sandao was bathed in blood. In front of him, the corpses of the demons piled up into a hill, but more demons rushed up without hesitation. Those demons were not of the royal family, but some cannon fodder-level servants. Their strength was weak, but they won in number. Lu Sandao was like an arrow at the end of its flight. Not long after, his sword defense was broken, and those beast-type demons rushed forward to bite his body. Ha ha ha, you bastards want to eat me? Then I'll let you eat to your heart's content today. With that, the king pill exploded, and the burst of sword chi swept in all directions. Hundreds and thousands of demons were stirred into meat sauce, and Lu Sandao himself did not even have his bones left. After Lu Sandao's death, a small flying sword, carrying a flickering ball of light, wobbled towards a certain place. This was a deep underground cave. 3 disciples of Spirit Sword Sect guarded the entrance of the cave, stepping on the 3 individual sword array, struggling to resist the siege of thousands of demons outside the cave. Before long, the 3 of them felt that their magical power was exhausted, and it was difficult for them to continue. One of them clenched his teeth and said, Wang Chenai Xiamingxian, you go first. Understood. Then the palms of the 3 people gently touched each other. The leader spat out a ball of light from his palm, and then he grinned. Remember to help me find a reliable person. Rest assured, Senior Brother Song. After many times of sacrifice, the disciples of Spirit Sword Sect were no longer unfamiliar with life and death separation. Wang Chenai and Xiamingxian didn't hesitate too much and just turned around to leave. Then Senior Brother Song turned around, and the king pill in his jade mansion burst into pieces, which turned into thousands of flying swords and stirred up a bloody storm outside the cave. Next to a crystal-like calm lake, Xiamingxian helped Wang Chenai walk slowly. While walking, he used the moonlight reflected on the water to heal his injury. However, it didn't take long for Wang Chenai to shake his head. Junior Brother Xia, I don't think I can make it. Don't waste your energy to heal me. No. You've saved me so many times, how can I just watch you die? Consider it as my atonement. If it weren't for me and Zhangsheng, how could these things happen? You guys were implicated by us. Of course, I'm still better than that kid Zhangsheng. He's too unreasonable, he ruined the big thing for a woman. Forget it, Senior Brother always says that when a person is about to die, his words are kind, so I'll say something nice. Mingxian, you must live. With that, he stretched out his hand and pressed it on Xia Mingxian's chest. Mingxian, there are some words that I actually wanted to say a long time ago. I'm listening. There's actually a reason why I haven't had a girlfriend all these years. Ha, look at how scared you are. Here, Senior Brother Song's belongings, oh, and mine, I'll give them to you. With that, an unquestionable warmth flowed into his jade mansion. Xia Mingxian opened his mouth and said with a trembling voice, Who are you going to give them to? Who else is left? Wang Chenye's eyes dimmed. Chapter 537. Eldest Senior Brother, don't worry, we have long been prepared to sacrifice everything. You don't need to tell us, we know. Feng Yin said in a deep voice. Lu Xian was also disheartened. Living until now, my life is no longer my own. This rotten life, if eldest Senior Brother needs it, just take it. Feng He said, well, as long as we can defeat that demon king, a mere life is not worth mentioning. Zhou Ming smiled bitterly. Originally, it shouldn't be us who survived, but Senior Sister Fei Ying and the others, so, enough. Oing Shang snapped, what are you doing? Who said you want to die? Feng Yin was stunned. But apart from dying, what else can we, a group of mediocre people, do? Live. Ouying Shang said, what I want you to do is this one thing. No matter what, live for me. Now there are only you left in Lingjian School, but as long as you are alive, Lingjian School will not disappear. Lu Xian said, as long as eldest senior brother is alive, there is hope for everything. As for us, there is no one sect in the world. Ouyang Shang shouted again. And before they died, they gave their inheritance to you. Do you want you to sacrifice yourself and let everything go to waste? Your life is no longer your own. Each of you carries the inheritance of others. You are not qualified to talk about sacrifice. Yes, I understand. Remember, even if not for yourself, for those who died. Live for me, no matter what happens, you must live. After that, Ouyang Shang turned his head to look at Wang Wu. I have something to say to you alone. Oh. After Ouyang Shang left with Wang Wu, Feng Yin and the others collapsed. Why is it us? On the other side, Ouyang Shang brought Wang Wu to a secluded room. After entering the room, Wang Wu looked a little nervous. Ouyang Shang looked at her and smiled, then said, I haven't said this to anyone, but you must know. Me? 3 days ago, I single-handedly charged into the lair of the Demon King. What? Don't be so surprised. Previously, he was severely injured by the demon wolf Fenrir and master and martial uncles. His strength is no longer at its peak. As for me, Wang Wu nodded lightly. She had known for a long time that Ouyang Shang's true strength was far beyond the imagination of others. After more than 10 years of experience, Ouyang Shang had already taken the lead. At that time, I found an excellent opportunity to strike. According to my calculations, I should have a 70% chance of killing the Demon King. But when it comes to actual combat, I don't even have a 10% chance of winning. Why? Because my luck was stolen, and it even became an obstacle. You should know that I've always been favored by the earth, and the effect of my earth element celestial technique is especially good. But in the battle with the Devil King, every step I took felt like my feet were stuck in the mud, and there were layers upon layers of resistance. I couldn't even feel the earth element spiritual chi during the battle, and when I absorbed the spiritual chi of heaven and earth, I lacked one of the 5 elements. Also, the king pill sometimes trembles and doesn't listen to me. Oh. Do you remember that I once told you about the origin of the so-called luck? Do you think that 9 regions can be regarded as an intelligent creature, and the luck is an investment in 9 regions? Yes, and since it's an investment, of course it can be recovered. Ouyang Shang said, at least, it can be understood that the Demon King has a higher management authority than me. A higher management authority? Wang Wu was surprised. How is that possible? Your luck is given to you by the 9 regions, which means that the entire continent recognizes you. How could the Demon King have enough management authority to recover the luck? Probably because the true identity of the Demon King is the fallen immortal. Ouyang Shang said. Fallen immortal? Yes, but it's just my guess. The limit of a cultivator is to ascend to become an immortal. Although the scene of the immortal world has never been spread in 9 regions, it would not be a dead water. I think there will also be competition, contradiction, conflict, victory and defeat. The winner will continue to live high in the immortal world, while the loser will escape into the hell where demons and devils abound. However, they are unwilling to fail and want to make a comeback. That's why there is a crack in the sky. They want to occupy 9 regions and then return to the immortal world through 9 regions. Although they are fallen immortals, they are still immortals, and their strength has exceeded the limit of 9 regions. And since they can become immortals among hundreds of millions of cultivators, their understanding and use of luck must be far above that of the cultivators of 9 regions. But in this way, it means that all the so-called heaven's chosen ones have become worthless in front of the fallen immortals. But even so, he has been seriously injured and will not live for long. Yes, now this fallen immortal is no longer a concern, but I'm afraid there's more than one fallen immortal. Could it be that he tried to open the passage between the 2 worlds at all costs in order to welcome those cannon fodder into 9 regions? Behind the passage is a big world. But the crack in the sky has been filled. Before the crack in the sky appeared, couldn't he still enter 9 regions? If he's dead, it's hard to guarantee that there won't be another one. And at that time, will we still have such good luck to stop it? Wang Wu felt extremely heavy in her heart. She was silent for a long time and said, "Why tell me this specifically? Because you have to know." As soon as her voice fell, Onyangshang suddenly stepped forward and held Wang Wu's hand, which surprised her. She struggled subconsciously, but she couldn't break free. If it was more than 10 years ago, Wang Wu would have felt great happiness, but at this moment she was extremely panicked. Seems that you already know. Ouyangshang smiled slightly and said, "You're indeed my most promising junior sister." Eldest brother, don't. However, before her voice fell, a gentle warmth was transmitted from her hand. Wang Wu resisted even more intensely, but under the absolute suppression of Ouyangshang, she had no choice. After struggling for a while, Wang Wu finally gave up. The power from her palm became more and more warm, constantly infiltrating her whole body inside and outside, nourishing her body, jade mansion and primordial spirit. It made her more powerful. Moreover, it made her more powerful from the root. This kind of inherited method that could improve other people's aptitude and root bone could be said to be the first in the history of 9 regions. However, as the beneficiary, Wang Wu felt heart-wrenching grief. She raised her head high and tried not to let the tears in her eyes flow down. "Why me? Because only you have this ability." Ouyangshang's tone has been stained with a trace of exhaustion. "Other people don't know your real talent, but how could I not see it? Don't forget, it was me who advocated for you to join the Golden Generation. Senior brother, yes, you're just a mediocre person with a low-rank spirit root. Others laugh at you for having a natural 5th-rank spirit root, but they don't know that you actually don't even have a 5th-rank spirit root. It's a miracle for you to achieve your current achievement with a low-rank spirit root. Sure enough, senior brother, you've already seen it. It's not just me, some of the elders have also seen it. Otherwise, with your previous achievement, it shouldn't be so difficult for you to enter the Golden Generation." Ouyangshang said, "If your spirit root doesn't enter the middle rank, there's no hope for you to take the king pill. Even if you have the help of heavenly materials and earthly treasures, it's impossible to cross the threshold of Yuanying stage. This is the common sense since ancient times." Wang Wu bitterly said, "That being the case, senior brother, why did you?" "Because I never believe in common sense. At least, I never believe that common sense can restrain you. You've broken too many common sense to be able to come all the way to this day. How can my achievement be considered as breaking common sense?" Wang Wu shook her head. "Not to mention eldest senior brother, even among the other senior brothers and sisters, there are many people who are stronger than me. They're not worthy of senior brother's attention. Having external help is not enough." Ouyangshang sighed. "In the Golden Generation, there are too many people who are favored by the heaven and earth, blessed by luck, so they can advance triumphantly all the way. Among them, I can be regarded as the best. But you have neither outstanding talent nor any luck. In fact, I'm afraid you're much more unlucky than ordinary cultivators. But you've still come this far, keeping abreast of the other people who are blessed by the heaven and earth, because your inner strength is far stronger than others. You work harder than anyone else, you're more determined than anyone else, and you're smarter than anyone else. You have the true aptitude of a low-rank spirit root, but you can cultivate a cultivation technique that can only be cultivated by a middle-rank spirit root. Your understanding and creativity of cultivation techniques have long surpassed anyone. Even I am ashamed of my inferiority. That's just an insignificant skill. No matter how hard I work, it's nothing more than going from low rank to middle rank. What's the point of this achievement? Whether it's an insignificant skill or not, it's meaningless. Why bother deceiving yourself and others? Junior sister Wang Wu, one day you will shine in 9 regions. Shine in 9 regions? Senior brother, you think too highly of me. I've never overestimated anyone. In my opinion, you're only lacking one thing. Sense of responsibility. What you lack is a sense of responsibility. For a long time, you've been cultivating alone under the brilliance of other senior brothers and sisters, indifferent to the outside world, and even introverted and autistic. This is not because you lack the ability, but because you don't want to take more responsibility and actively avoid all opportunities to perform. If the Golden Generation can grow up smoothly, then there would be other people to support everything in Lingjian School, and it would be fine if you want to be good to yourself. But now the situation has changed. There's no pillar around you, so you have to stand up and support it all yourself. I don't have confidence. Wang Wu felt the increasingly turbulent energy pouring into her palm, and the panic and wavering in her heart could no longer be suppressed. Ouyang Shang said, I know you don't, but I won't give you the chance to escape. With that, an unprecedented abundant energy poured into Wang Wu's body. I've given you everything so you can't escape, right? Wang Wu finally couldn't help but cry out, Big brother, you're too cruel. You know very well that I never wanted your inheritance, never. I just want to cultivate in peace and quietly like someone. How can you be so cruel? If you want to eliminate the Demon King, if you want to revitalize the sect, if you want to save 9 regions, then do it yourself. Why do you want to embarrass me? If you think you're not capable enough, then take everything away from me. If I alone am not enough, there are so many people outside who are willing to sacrifice. Sacrifice can't solve anything. Only survival can win. Then you must live. Don't throw everything to me and then sacrifice yourself. Listen. Yes, the most important thing for people to live is to be happy, and then let others eat. By the way, eldest senior brother said that it won't be long before the reinforcements from the Wanxian League come. You guys might as well think about how to wrangle with those people. Most of our sex people have died. Don't be directly removed from the Wanxian League. What? The reinforcements from the Wanxian League? That's what eldest senior brother said. If you don't believe it, then forget it. Wang Wu said and shrugged. I'm going to take a nap. Senior brothers and junior brothers, please help yourself. At the same time, at the foot of a distant volcano, Ouyang Shang saw the Demon King who had been waiting for a long time. A few months ago on this mountain, a crack that tore the world opened the passage between the two worlds. The elders of Spirit Sword School sacrificed everything to fill the gap. And now, the eldest disciple of Lingjian School returned here, ready for the final battle. Ha, sorry to keep you waiting. Humph, with the big heart demon oath. I'm not afraid of you running away. It seems that your funeral has been settled, so let's get started. With that, the Demon King stretched out his incomplete left hand, crossed the space, and directly pressed it on Ouyang Shang's forehead. Ouyang Shang's whole body was shocked, but his tone was as calm as ever. If you win, this body will belong to you. You will have the body of a top cultivator, and the current injury will not be worth mentioning. Thus, you will have the capital to continue to plot in 9 regions. And if you lose, your memory will belong to me. I will have the knowledge of an immortal, and from then on my future will be boundless. And you won't have any chance of winning. The Demon King coldly said and exerted more force on his hand, and a huge force began to pour into his seriously injured body. The layers of primordial spirit defense built by Ouyang Shang collapsed, and it couldn't even delay for a moment. Soon, the consciousness of the Demon King invaded along the open passage. The next moment, the Demon King's anger boiled. You lied to me? Ha, I'm bound by the Great Heart Demon Oath. How could I dare to lie to you? As long as you win, my body and Jade Mansion will belong to you. I didn't renege on the debt, I just cleaned up the inventory before coming here. When I sold the house, I didn't say that it must be accompanied by furniture and decoration, right? Speaking of which, what do you think of my little camouflage skill? Is it acceptable? Go to hell. If you want to die, go to hell yourself. I promised a girl that I would go back to find her. Sorry, I can't accompany you. You can play by yourself. How dare you? Once this battle starts, it will not end until one of us dies. Ha, I didn't say I would make a truce with you. This is a strategic change. It won't be too late for me to regroup and take your dog life after 100 years. I just don't know if your incomplete soul can hold on for that long, ha. While speaking, a primordial spirit seemed to want to escape from his swollen body. Don't even think about escaping. The black rope firmly bound the escaping primordial spirit. Hey, don't be so persistent. In any case, your fallen immortal world is full of talented people. Even if you die, there will be more. The primordial spirit kept trying to break free. Although the Demon King refused to let go at all, the power that bound it gradually loosened. Don't try. You waste your strength on breaking through, but I bet all my bets on escaping. You can't stop me. Maybe so. The Demon King said in a deep voice, but don't think you won. As soon as his voice fell, His body that was full of primordial spirit exploded. The self-explosion of his body released an unprecedented terrifying power. The thousands of feet high mountain collapsed at this moment, lava poured out, and the area within a radius of 100 miles was dead silent. The sky changed color, and a faint crack bloomed in the sky again. Then the world broke and became dark. It's over? In the darkness, Wang Lu shook his head in a daze. After looking at the memories for so long, he felt that his whole body was a little slow. Yes, it's over. What's the evaluation? This is a bad ending, right? Wang Lu shrugged. A big explosion and then the whole play is over? There are still a lot of things that haven't been explained clearly at all. Big brother, why did you show me this? Because this is an essential review before the award ceremony. Award ceremony? Wang Lu asked doubtfully. However, at this moment, a red dot lit up in the darkness. The Demon King with the right half of his body permanently missing appeared in his field of vision. The Demon King looked tired and weak, no longer as high-spirited as he used to be. And this time he appeared with a look of relief. You win. As he said that, he handed a round crystal ball in his left hand to Wang Lu. Before Wang Lu could take it, it disappeared. Big brother's teasing voice sounded behind him. Tsk tisk, it's really not easy for the old guy. His resentment hasn't dissipated even after more than 100 years. Impressive. Wang Lu was silent for a while. He felt that everything he experienced seemed so out of place. He asked the void, was the previous transmigration just a dream? Dream? That wasn't a dream. It was a war, and the result of the war was that you won. I won. Wang Lu felt that the sense of incongruity was getting heavier. I don't remember participating in any gambling activity. The so-called victory should refer to the bet you made with the Demon King 150 years ago, right? The prize for victory is his memory and knowledge as a fallen immortal, but it doesn't make sense. The person who made the bet with him is you, but the person who finally accepted the challenge is me. Does this count? Ouyang Shang said with a smile. 150 years ago, I cheated and took the lead in the gambling fight. However, the Demon King was unyielding, so he self-detonated his body in order to perish together with me. The strong energy coincidentally loosened the corner of the heaven-mending technique and shook my primordial spirit into the void. Can you guess what happened after that? It's not like I transmigrated in the 3,000 worlds, right? Haha, at that time I was lost in the turbulence of time and space for a long time. When I woke up, I found myself in a proletarian country under the rule of the bourgeoisie. Yes, it's really a dreamlike life. There are so many wonderful things in it that it's enough to make people forget about home and home. So, I did hesitate and hesitate, but in 9 regions I still owe her a promise. Moreover, it's hard for me to let my junior brothers and sisters face danger in 9 regions, while I enjoy the comfort of a different world alone. So, hearing this, Wang Lu's heart was beating wildly. The truth that he was about to face seemed to be beyond the endurance limit of normal people. However, in the dark, Wang Lu kept hearing the voice in the depths of his heart. Have you never wondered where you came from? Have you never wondered where the vague memory of a professional adventurer came from? Have you never wondered if the so-called void spirit root was really a gift from heaven? In confusion, Wang Lu heard Ouyang Shang continue to speak. So I decided to come back. Of course it's not easy, but I learned a lot of things in the other world. Moreover, by chance I got the peerless spirit root that was above the fallen immortal. Then, taking advantage of the space shock in the 3,000 worlds, I abandoned most of my memory and primordial spirit power and came back through the space-time crack. While speaking, Ouyang Shang came out of the void. However, what appeared in front of Wang Lu was a face that was exactly the same as his own. You. Wang Lu frowned and stared at the other party. There were thousands of words in his heart, but in the end he couldn't say a word. After a long time, Wang Lu smiled helplessly. A beautiful gay relationship has turned into self-masturbation. I'm also drunk. Chapter 538. Ah, the sky is so blue, so blue. On the vast expanse of grassland, Wang Lu sat in a large carriage, looked up at the sky, and sighed sincerely at the blue sky. Little brother, is there something bothering you? The old man driving the car asked loudly against the howling wind. Hearing this, Wang Lu couldn't help but be surprised. Huh? Why do you ask? Big brother, you can see it? The driver chuckled. You've sighed more than 20 times today that the sky is so blue. Yes, the sky is really blue. Wang Lu sighed again and then lay down on the carriage, no longer looking at the sky. However, a moment later he felt impatient. Annoyance came one after another, making him unable to bear it. So Wang Lu simply moved to the front of the carriage, moved behind the driver, and asked with interest, Big brother, you've been driving in the southern heaven region for so many years, so you must be very knowledgeable. I want to ask you a question. Little brother, please ask. For a distinguished guest who had spent a lot of money to hire him as a driver, the old driver showed a very good sense of service. Wang Lu asked, say if one day you get drunk and do a lot of stupid things, some good and some bad things, and when you wake up you forget all those things. Before he finished, the driver laughed. Little brother, you've asked the right person. I've encountered this kind of thing too many times. Every time I leave Hangzhou to go somewhere else, after I come back I will drink a few cups. Sometimes when I make a lot of money I will drink more. And when I wake up the next day at noon I don't remember anything, haha. Wang Lu smiled and then said, if you do something particularly out of line and have a close relationship with the people around you, what should I do? The driver waved his hand. What else can I do? If I have to admit my mistakes, I have to admit my mistakes. Hey, you're right. Wang Lu shrugged. Little brother. The driver simply began to nag. I see that you're young, have an extraordinary way of talking, and are generous, so you're not from an ordinary family. For a big shot like you, even if you do something wrong, there's still room for redemption. There's really nothing to be afraid of. Look at me. Last year, when I was drunk, I broke a porcelain bottle. I had to pay for 3 years of my savings, but it still wasn't enough. If I hadn't met a kind-hearted person who helped me out, I would be eating food in prison now. However, sometimes when the matter is too big, you have to be more cautious when facing it. If it really doesn't work, you have to go back on your word when it's time to do so. Wang Lu laughed. Well said. When it's time to go back on your word, go back on your word. The two of them laughed for a while, and Wang Lu gradually began to talk about sex. He asked, let's say you fall in love with someone, and that person is not bad in all aspects, and he's also quite interested in you. How to face a reincarnated big brother was probably a problem for Feng Yin and the others. Continue to let him be the lead disciple of Spirit Sword Mountain? It didn't seem appropriate. Abdicate and give him the position of sect leader? It seemed even more absurd. Moreover, the key to the problem was Wang Wu. Wang Lu didn't know how to face his respected master. After seeing that dark history, Wang Lu's heart could be said to have mixed feelings. There was admiration, there was sympathy, there was that kind of feeling, not to mention the awakening of his previous life's consciousness only allowed Wang Lu to know some things, but he would not inherit Ouyang Shang's memory. Therefore, the farewell kiss as well as the promise of eternal love was really a burden. This matter was not only for him but also for Wang Wu. For her, the memory of more than 100 years ago had probably faded. As for that promise, presumably, she would only hide it at the bottom of her heart. Because people always had to look forward. Those who could not forget the past had no qualification to move forward. At the same time, after so many years, Wang Wu's happy character had long been deeply ingrained and could not be restored. The reason was very simple. More than 100 years ago, when Ouyang Shang said his last words to her, how old was Wang Wu? How old was she now? Most of her life was spent in a happy heart. Her stubborn and introverted character had probably gone with the wind. So, for a happy Wang Wu, if she put on the posture of a former lover, what would the result be? Junior sister, I'm late. Not late, not late. Let's consummate our marriage and then share the property, ha ha ha. To be honest, such a scene was not difficult to imagine. At the same time, it was not difficult to predict the development of the future. Scandal, big scandal. A shocking scandal broke out in Lingjian School, one of the 5 uniques of the Wanxian League. The 5th elder of the Heavenly Sword Hall, Wang Wu, and the head disciple of the school, Wang Lu, disregarded ethics and shamelessly committed adultery. When questioned, she actually used the excuse of a former lover, which was the biggest joke in the world. Please see this issue of the news for details. 1 spirit stone for 1 copy. 1 spirit stone for 1 copy. The following is a report from our reporter. Hello everyone. I am Xiao Mei, a reporter from the 9 States News Center in the Blue River region. Regarding the recent uproar of the Lingjian school, I have interviewed the insiders of the Lingjian school. According to the third elder of the Heavenly Sword Hall, who did not want to be named, Wang Wu has always been unruly in the school, which has a bad precedent, so it is not surprising that this scandal has caused. The school has long been dissatisfied with her. It is said that the Heavenly Sword Hall has held many sect leaders' office meetings, and many elders have jointly proposed to punish her, which has received the support of the school. Fifth junior sister. Now the public opinion is in an uproar. I think you also know that the matter between you and eldest senior brother. No, Wang Lu actually has a lot of support within the school, but after all, the pressure of public opinion is too great, so you see, sect leader senior brother, other things are not a big deal, but the problem is that we already have a child. What? When? When you held the sect leader's office meeting that night, I discovered the crisis in time, so I worked with Wang Lu overnight, and finally we reaped the harvest. You don't want the child in my belly to be born without a father, do you? Hey, this move of yours is too cheap. The most important thing to be a person is to be happy. Get lost. These were the thoughts of Wang Lu. At the thought of that kind of life, Wang Lu was disheartened and had no interest in returning to the mountain. Alas, if I knew it would be like this, I wouldn't have gone to the demon world in the first place. It's so troublesome. Wang Lu was lying on his back in the carriage, bored to death. Of course, objectively speaking, although his trip to the demon world and the dream of time travel had brought him countless problems, it was also a big profit. His current entanglement was somewhat of a pretentious act, not to mention the undigested inheritance of the fallen immortal that was still in his jade mansion. The things left behind by Ouyang Shang in his previous life were quite rich. The simplest one was that after learning about his own life experience, many questions that had puzzled him for a long time were answered. For example, where did the wonderful ideas that lingered in his mind since he was born come from? Including the concept of professional adventurers, bourgeoisie, proletariat. Since his birth, these things had constantly flashed through his mind, and occasionally he would dream of many wonderful scenes. Hundreds of feet high metal and glass buildings, huge metal machines and puppets. It was a wonder that no corner of 9 regions had ever seen, but it lingered in his mind. At that time, by chance, he heard that there were people in the world who were born with knowledge, and their situation was quite similar to his own. And all of those people had earth-shattering achievements, coupled with the void spirit root, which made him see and hear different things since he was a child. He had a firm ambition to cultivate immortality. Now that he thought about it, wasn't he a time traveler? Of course, this time traveler was more complicated than his peers. At the same time, it was no wonder that he subconsciously chose Lingjian school, although being close to home was the most important factor. With his self-confidence at that time, the #1 sect in the world, Shangjing sect, was actually a better choice. These problems seemed insignificant, but for a cultivator, they were an important part of self-awareness. In the future, when he reached Yuanying stage and deity stage, if these problems were not solved, he would inevitably encounter obstacles and even inner demons. Now that all the problems were clear, some of the obstacles on the road of immortal cultivation had been swept away. Secondly, the awakening of the consciousness of his previous life made Wang Lu feel as if a bright light had been lit in his heart. Simply put, there were some clear purposes in life. Before that, his life and immortal cultivation were somewhat muddle-headed. After joining the Spirit Sword sect, although he had done a lot of things, most of them were because of the situation. Simply put, when the problem came, he would go and solve it. When the problem didn't come, he would just honestly cultivate on the mountain. His initiative was not strong, but now it was different. Fallen immortal. What a big problem. Chapter 539. The second reason to prevent Wang Lu from returning to the sect as soon as possible was the inheritance of the fallen immortal. The crystal ball of light had not been completely absorbed, but Wang Lu had extracted a considerable part of the knowledge from it. The inheritance of the fallen immortal was not as rich as initially expected. The fallen immortal was deceived by Ouyang Shang's trick. After exploding his body, The remaining trace of primordial spirit was restrained by the great heart demon oath and could not be reincarnated. When he met with Wang Lu, there was actually only a layer of dregs left. Were it not for this in his dreamland, Wang Lu would not have won the decisive battle so easily. Thus, after many tricks, the fruit of victory would naturally be greatly reduced. After more than 100 years of weathering, most of the memory of the fallen immortal had been lost or incomplete, leaving only a small part. Among them, the most valuable was some experience about the dream-building technique. Wang Lu intended to spend some time to study it carefully and strive to master this unique skill of the demon world. There were also 2 or 3 incomplete immortal-level methods. However, for people who came from the 5 uniques of the Wanxian League, the incomplete immortal-level method was of little significance. It only had a certain academic research value. After all, even the complete immortal-level method Stellar Sword was not very attractive to Wang Lu now. Apart from that, the most important thing in the inheritance of the fallen immortal was his memory about the fallen immortal world, tentatively named the world occupied by the fallen immortals. Because most of the memory had been weathered and incomplete, Wang Lu looked vague. He only saw a sea of purgatory fire and countless creatures suffering in pain. It was a scene of hell. On that day, in the dream of the fallen immortal, the crack in the sky was briefly opened, and a large number of cannon fodder creatures poured out. Those cannon fodder were grotesque, murderous and resentful. It was a characteristic that could only be cultivated in absolute torture. The situation in the fallen immortal world could also be seen. If this group of fallen immortals were allowed to rush out of the passage and occupy 9 regions, it would be a disaster. Perhaps it would be worse than the defeat in the Great War of Immortals and Demons. Therefore, at that time, the previous generation of Elders of Spirit Sword Sect did not hesitate to seal the crack in the sky, which was really a great merit. No matter how insidious the politics in the Wanxian League were, they had nothing to say. But things didn't end there. The fallen immortal world had never stopped spying on 9 regions. The previous fallen immortal who sneaked into the demon world, who seemed to be called Mr. Fengyu, was just a vanguard, and the main force was still waiting behind. After the death of Mr. Fengyu, the fallen immortal world would not let it go. They would send new people, and they would only be stronger than Mr. Fengyu. Was 9 regions ready to face the next fallen immortal? At least from the current peaceful scene, there was no such thing at all. Let alone the fallen immortal world, even the matter of the devil race had almost been forgotten. Now, except for the immortal race and the devil race, who else could really be familiar with the matters of the devil race? In addition to devoting themselves to cultivation, cultivators wasted their energy on internal strife. If it weren't for the recent emergence of Fengdu in the southern heaven region, which diverted a considerable part of the social contradictions, it was feared that a local war would break out in the Wanxian League to alleviate the contradictions. Of course, things did not need to be too pessimistic. According to the memory of Mr. Fengyu, the passage between the 2 worlds was very difficult to break through. Mr. Fengyu himself spent 2,000 years but failed on the verge of success, so it was not so easy for future generations to inherit his career. At least for the first step, how to send the vanguard into 9 regions again was a big problem. The first vanguard of the fallen immortal world, Mr. Fengyu, could only enter 9 regions through a detour in the demon world. Now that the demon world was basically destroyed, it was not so easy to use the old way to send people over. However, it was just not easy. Things were far from being worry-free. From the memory of Mr. Fengyu, Wang Lu learned that after Mr. Fengyu was suppressed by Fenrir, the fallen immortal world had begun to explore a variety of new ways to invade, and several of them had made great progress. Time waited for no man, however. When he wanted to further analyze the content, he found that part of the content was actually encrypted. This Mr. Fengyu, who had been air-dried for 100 years, still had such a strong sense of confidentiality, which caused a lot of trouble for the later generations. Thinking of this, Wang Lu turned over in the carriage with some irritation and said, "Why is the sky so blue?" One day later, the carriage arrived at its destination, Mang Mountain City. This grassland city was backed by Mount Mang, and could be regarded as a remote border city. The population of the city was only a few thousand, and even the city wall was sloppy. Fortunately, the people were simple, so it was also a comfortable place. The coachman sent Wang Lu to the city, enthusiastically introduced the local customs of Mang Mountain City, and tried to recommend an inn to him. Along the way, he could see that Wang Lu was from an extraordinary background, so he planned to choose the most expensive inn in the city and get a lot of commission for himself. Unexpectedly, he only talked until his mouth was dry, but there was no sound behind the carriage. In the battle with the fallen immortal Feng Yu in the dream, his harvest was comprehensive. The comprehensive improvement of his cultivation base brought by the 3 years of living in gutter oil was real. Now Wang Lu's cultivation base was at the peak of king pill stage, but this kind of peak king pill stage that was soaked in gutter oil naturally needed to be squeezed out of the water. Then Wang Lu chose Mount Mang. This mountain, which was more than 1,000 feet high, was regarded as a barren mountain in the map of the immortal cultivation world. Because although in theory there were often immortal spirits in the mountains, at least it was easy to become a node of feng shui line. After all, the mountain itself was the product of the violent movement of the Earth's crust. However, Mount Mang was a special case. Not to mention the node of feng shui line, even the feng shui line avoided it. The surrounding spiritual energy was pitifully thin. Therefore, Mount Mang was also called the Blind Mountain by many cultivators in the southern heaven region. However, this kind of place was the best for the current Wang Lu. His king pill had been formed, so his true qi and magical power could grow and multiply endlessly. Moreover, his cultivation base was too high, so he didn't need to use the outside spiritual energy to enhance his cultivation base. In fact, with his void spirit root qualification, it was best to find a place isolated from spiritual energy, so as not to accidentally absorb a large amount of spiritual energy into his body. For Taoist Master King Pill, the mountain was only a step away, but Wang Lu didn't want to expose his identity near Mt. Mang. So he walked on foot and spent half a day to reach the peak. Mount Mang was indeed worthy of being called a blind mountain with thin spiritual qi of heaven and earth. Not to mention cultivators, even ordinary creatures were rare. The peak of the mountain was barren with rocks, and there were pitifully few birds, beasts, and even insects. Wang Lu didn't pay attention to it. He directly found a flat stone and sat cross-legged. Then, his primordial spirit sank down from his purple mansion and combined with the king pill, which was so full that it looked like it was about to burst. He urged it to rotate crazily, constantly throwing out the impurities inside the king pill. The power from the black tide was soon squeezed out by Wang Lu's non-phase chaos king pill. Although the size of the king pill was reduced, it made the structure of the king pill more plump and pure. This process lasted for a full 3 days. After 3 days, the king pill in his jade mansion had shrunk by 1/10, and Wang Lu's overall cultivation level had fallen from the peak of king pill to the high level of king pill. However, although his cultivation level had fallen, Wang Lu felt that his strength had not fallen, but instead it had risen because the king pill had shrunk, which made it more convenient to use. Moreover, in the process of shrinking his Dan, Wang Lu also began to try to integrate the non-phase method and primal chaos heaven splitting sword qi in the king pill. Of these 2 immortal level methods, one focused on attack and the other focused on defense. Although they could be said to have both offense and defense when used together, after all, there was still a bit of sluggishness in the conversion of these 2 methods. When he crushed the small fish, he didn't feel it, but when he faced the same level or even higher level powerhouses, it would be a big problem. Previously, in the final decisive battle in the dream, he designed the 3 individual sword array and occupied the sky position. However, in the actual combat, he could only use the primal chaos heaven splitting sword qi to attack. There was no room for his non-phase method. This was because at present, he had no way to freely switch between the 2 immortal level methods. According to the previous plan, the integration of the 2 methods should be done after he reached Yuanying stage. However, after obtaining the inheritance of Mr. Feng Yu, Wang Lu felt that there was some inspiration in his mind, and it seemed that he could implement this step ahead of time. Although the difficulty was not small and it would take a long time. However, in any case, he had not come up with a plan on how to face the elders of Spirit Sword sect. Thus, Wang Lu planned to concentrate on cultivation first and put other things aside. Unfortunately, 2 days later the plan was ruthlessly aborted. Wang Lu could naturally guess what had happened down there. TSK at that time he was distracted and inadvertently made a mistake. The Shudon stage cultivator in MT Mang City was not a guardian at all, but a fierce evil cultivator. The reason why he came to Laoshan City was to refine the million spirits blood pearl with the lives of thousands of mortals in the city. Damn it, I can't even find a secluded place to cultivate. Why is the sky so blue? With Wang Lu's current mood, he didn't really care about the tragedy at the foot of Pyrolite Mountain. The so-called principle of immortals and mortals walking different paths had long been imprinted on him. The enlightened King Pill. 9 regions was so big and there were hundreds of millions of mortals. Killing and torture happened all the time. Even if he had great ability, it was impossible for him to take care of them all. Moreover, the things that happened here would be dealt with by the Wanxian League. As an outsider, there was no need for him to intervene. However, the evil cultivator in MT Mang City had made such a big move this time. Especially when he openly revealed the name of the million spirits blood pearl, as if he was afraid that others wouldn't know that he was courting death. So, it wouldn't be long before the commissioner of the local sect came. They might not be able to stop the evil cultivator who refined the blood pearl in time, but when they came, Wang Lu wouldn't be able to stay on the top of Pyrolite Mountain anymore. Even more pessimistically, the traces he left on the top of the mountain might be discovered, and then his whereabouts would be exposed. In less than 3 days, he would be dragged back to the mountain by an old woman who lacked moral integrity for more than 100 years to bow to the heaven and earth and get married. They would have sex every day and night, so that they could give birth to a noble son early, and the mother would become noble because of her son. Thinking of this, Wang Lu's whole body trembled, and he quickly began to clean up the traces. However, for cultivators who were good at divination and above, it was difficult to clean up the traces, so he just did his best. At the same time, he directly used his primordial spirit to sweep down, intending to leave a mark on the evil cultivator. That guy had ruined his plan, so he wouldn't let it go so easily. If he didn't beat the sh*t out of him, he wouldn't be able to think clearly. As a result, when his primordial spirit swept down, he saw something unexpected. MT Mang City had now been massacred by the evil cultivator. Broken tiles and ruins were everywhere, and the fire was soaring to the sky. At the door of an inn next to the former main road of MT Mang City, a man who was about 40 or 50 years old fell to the ground with his head tilted. There was a huge hole in his chest, and the blood had already coagulated. His heart in his chest was cruelly pulled out and thrown aside. Tian Laosan, who was already drunk, laughed and said, "Humph, a fortune? I don't care about making a fortune anymore. I've been having a good time in the city these days, spending all my private money, because this time I'm so lucky and met an immortal fate." The girls looked at him curiously. Immortal fate? Tian Laosan couldn't keep it a secret, and he knew that the girls in the drunken immortal house loved these strange stories. He took out the silver ingots and spirit stones to show off. "I met an immortal, ha ha." However, the next moment the door opened, and a gust of chilly wind blew in. Riding the chilly wind, a young man broke into the room. He was wearing a black robe with hundreds of red dots printed on it. He stared at the spirit stones in Tian Laosan's hand and asked coldly, "An immortal?" Tian Laosan was stunned and then became furious. Who are you? Who let you in? Get out." The young man said coldly, "I'll ask you again. You said you met an immortal. Is it an immortal like me?" The next moment the black robe moved, and a red dot flew out and turned into a bloody skeleton in the air. It bit off half of a girl's body. Blood and intestines flowed all over the ground. Tian Laosan was scared out of his wits. "Ah, please spare me, please spare me." The young man ignored him and grabbed the spirit stones. He played with them in his hand and frowned. Then his eyes became ferocious. "It's really the spirit stones of the Wanxian League. You've chased me all the way here and won't stop. Fine, since you're so aggressive, don't blame me for being desperate. Million spirits blood pearl, rise." Then the image could no longer be read. Wang Lu dispersed the remnant soul inside. This Tian Laosan was really unlucky to encounter this kind of misfortune. The young man in the black robe was most likely a cultivator who was being chased and ran to Mt. Mang City to hide and wait for an opportunity to heal. Mt. Mang was a place where the Reiki of heaven and earth was exhausted, and almost no cultivators came here. It was even more difficult for the pursuers to expect an injured person to hide in a place lacking Reiki, so he chose a good place. However, after Tian Lao-san entered the city with his adventure, because he couldn't control his mouth, the news of the immortal fate gradually spread, which shocked the evil cultivator who fled here. No cultivators had come to Mt. Mang City for many years. Not long after he was chased here, another person came. It was hard to believe that this was a coincidence. However, mortals were so ignorant that they might not have really met a cultivator. Maybe they were just dreaming after drinking too much. So he secretly watched Tian Lao-san. In his drunken stupor, he took out a few high-quality round spirit stones. Then in desperation, Mt. Mang City was destroyed. Wang Lu shook his head. Tian Lao-san died unjustly, and so did all the people in the city. Chapter 541. In the sky above Mt. Mang City, the black-robed cultivator looked at the sword cultivator who suddenly appeared in front of him in confusion. He originally thought that the cultivator who quietly entered Mt. Mang City was a cultivator of the Wanxian League, who secretly chased him. Unexpectedly, the one who was stimulated by the 10,000 spirits blood bead was a stranger. Moreover, the devil chi on his body was soaring to the sky, which meant that he was most likely an evil cultivator. There was nothing more unfortunate than this in the world. He was ready to do something desperate and did not hesitate to slaughter the entire city. Nearly 10,000 people in Mt. Mang City were killed by the evil method, and for a time the resentment soared to the sky. This kind of thing could not be hidden from others. It was estimated that in less than 3 days, in addition to the several young cultivators of the Wanxian League who chased him, even the elders would jump out to kill the evil. The genius disciple of the blood-refining sect, Zheng Liming, most likely would not be able to wait for the day when he would be able to move unhindered in the 9 regions. As the saying goes, a cornered dog would do something desperate. This was an act of drinking poison to quench thirst. However, unexpectedly, after drinking the poison, he found that his mouth was even drier. Who the hell are you? Zheng Liming was dismayed. He just wanted to know who this fellow cultivator who made him destroy his own future was. Immortal. Immortal. Zheng Liming was stunned for a long time, and then he felt even more unlucky. He didn't expect that the person who made him break out in a cold sweat was actually a madman. The path of immortal cultivation was full of thorns. There were countless people who were entangled by the devil in their heart and became delirious, thinking that they had become immortals. This kind of person's behavior was disordered and there was no rule to speak of. Zheng Liming was irritated for a while, and his killing intent gradually rose. The evil cultivators had no scruples in doing things, so the so-called friendship of fellow cultivators was of course just a joke. Although the realm of this madman seemed to be quite good middle-level King Pill. However, he came from a famous sect, had a deep foundation, and had the newly refined 10,000 spirits blood bead. Even if he was a middle-level King Pill, he might not necessarily lose. In addition, the strength of this kind of cultivator entangled by the devil in his heart would probably be reduced, so there was no need to be afraid of him. What was more, once he killed this kind of cultivator with high cultivation base, it would be an excellent tonic. If he could refine a Taoist master of Jindan stage into his 10,000 spirit blood pearl, his strength would double. At that time, not to mention the several cultivators of the Union of 10,000 Immortals, even if the elders came, unless they were Yuanying stage old monsters, he would still have a way to escape. With this thought in mind, Zheng Liming decided to make the first move. With a flick of his black robe, hundreds of blood skeletons shot out like raindrops. At the same time, he held the million spirits blood pearl in his hand, waiting for an opportunity. After all, his opponent was a perfected master in the elixir realm, so he didn't dare to be careless. Although the million spirits blood pearl was powerful, he only had one chance to challenge someone of a higher level. If he missed, he would die on the other side. Wang Lu didn't care about Zheng Liming's bloody skeletons at all. With his current strength, even if he didn't use any magical power, he could still resist the impact of these bloody skeletons with his body alone. If he used his primal chaos heaven-splitting sword qi, he would be able to scatter that evil cultivator's soul. Since Wang Lu's debut, he had always been challenging others, or even more than one level. How could it be someone else's turn to challenge him? It was just that now the situation was different. Wang Lu didn't want to show his real ability. Whether it was primal chaos heaven-splitting sword qi or non-phase method, they had a small reputation in the current Wanxian League. To be honest, it was quite surprising that the evil cultivator in front of him didn't recognize him, the lead disciple of Spirit Sword Sect. Once he used his signature skill, the trace was obvious, but he didn't want to expose his whereabouts so simply. Therefore, he could only use some of his signature skills. It just so happened that there were quite a few unorthodox methods in Mr. Feng Yu's legacy. Although they were not qualified to replace primal chaos heaven-splitting sword qi and non-phase method, they could be used as a useful supplement to the system of methods. Wang Lu had previously read them when he was shrinking his dantian, so at this time he could use them. The methods in the legacy of the fallen immortal were mixed. There were righteous methods and evil methods. Previously, Wang Lu used an evil sword technique called Bone Transformation Sword to break through the blood curtain of the 10,000 Spirit Blood Pearl. At this time, facing the bloody skeletons that were like raindrops, he remembered that there was a demonic method called blood-drinking seclusion, which was a special blood method. Thus, he casually used it, and the more than 100 bloody skeletons immediately vanished into thin air. Wang Lu smiled and thought that although there were few top-notch goods in the legacy of the fallen immortal, these unorthodox methods were really interesting. If used at the right time, they would not belong to those immortal-level methods. By using these things in a comprehensive way, his adaptability could be improved. The legacy of the fallen immortal was really extraordinary. He had previously underestimated the value of these things. On the other side, Zheng Liming was simply scared out of his wits. Just now, the more than 100 bloody skeletons were connected to his original method. Although they were not as overbearing as the 10,000 Spirit Blood Pearl, he was confident that even Taoist Master King Pill would find it difficult to face them head-on. However, unexpectedly, the other party casually waved his hand and turned the skeletons into ashes. How could he face such an opponent head-on? Not to mention the 10,000 Spirit Blood Pearl, even if he had the blood-drinking river diagram, the most precious treasure of the blood-refining sect, he would still not be his opponent. Therefore, Zheng Liming immediately thought of retreating. However, even if he wanted to leave, Wang Lu did not want to let him go. More than 100 bone transformation swords formed a bone cage to stop Zheng Liming. Zheng Liming backhanded his hand and shot out the 10,000 Spirit Blood Pearl. A round red bead flew like a meteor. Tens of thousands of wrong souls lingered around the blood bead, strengthening its momentum. The 10,000 Spirit Blood Pearl was indeed worthy of being the most precious treasure of the Devil Path. Before its body arrived, the bloody aura of a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood had already rushed over, constantly interfering with the cultivator's primordial spirit jade mansion. Wang Lu did not hesitate. He directly took out his jade mansion and spat out the king pill, which collided with the 10,000 Spirit Blood Pearl. This unyielding move shocked Zheng Liming for a full breath of time in midair. The opportunity to escape that he had fought for by sacrificing the 10,000 Spirit Blood Pearl had slipped away. It wasn't that Zheng Liming was too stupid, it was just that this move was too bizarre. It must be known that a golden core cultivator's golden core could be said to be the lifeblood of a cultivator. Once it was damaged, their cultivation in the immortal Tao would go down the drain. Ordinary people would not even have enough time to protect it, let alone use it as a hidden weapon. Even if a monster spat out its Niden, it would only be used when it was desperate. Wang Lu's move simply refreshed Zheng Liming's worldview. The next moment, Zheng Liming's eyes, which had been opened to the limit, widened even more, and his eyeballs almost popped out of his eye sockets. Because right in front of him, the 10,000 Spirit Blood Pearl was broken into pieces after being penetrated by the king pill. Is this the king pill or a hidden weapon? How could there be such a sharp king pill in the world? In addition to the shock, Zheng Liming also felt hopeless. His opponent was far more powerful than he had imagined, and even the million spirits' blood pearl had been destroyed. It could be said that he was doomed. Really, if he had known this, why did he care about what the coachman said? Wouldn't it be better to recuperate and then find a way to escape back to the sect? Now he was really seeking his own death. On the other side, Wang Lu also felt bored after making a successful move. After all, the opponent was too weak. The result of the whole process was that he basically gained nothing except for one skill proficiency. The only thing worth mentioning was that after the king pill collided with the 10,000 spirit blood pearl, the violent shock made the two cultivation methods in the king pill further fuse. Although the degree of fusion was not high, it opened up a new idea for Wang Lu. If there was a chance in the future, he might as well use the king pill to collide with something hard to see if it could further promote the fusion. While thinking about it, Wang Lu prepared the transformation bone sword to give Zhang Liming the final blow. After killing this evil cultivator whose hands were stained with blood, it would be his turn to run. In the short battle just now, he did not use any skills related to the Lingjian school. Unless the divination masters tried their best, they should not be able to figure out his origin. As long as Zhang Liming died, he believed that no one would be so bored to find out who killed him. In the area under the jurisdiction of the Wanxian League, everyone had the right to kill evil spirits. However, when Wang Lu pulled out his forearm bone and turned it into a pale bone sword, ready to cut off Zhang Liming's head, suddenly a starlight fell from the sky and fell directly on Zhang Liming's head. The starlight fell so fast that even Wang Lu was a little unprepared. He felt dizzy, and then he saw Zhang Liming's head flying high and blood splashing in the sky. Wang Lu was taken aback. This starlight descent was clearly an exceptionally powerful flying sword technique. Before he could react, that flying sword had already beheaded Zhang Liming. At that time, although Zhang Liming had somewhat abandoned himself to despair, his protective demonic method had yet to disperse, and the magical treasure-level blood corpse robe was still loyally protecting its master. As a result, when the sword light fell, the demonic skill and the robe all disintegrated. Zhang Liming's body was cut, and even his primordial spirit couldn't escape. In the blink of an eye, both his body and spirit were destroyed. This sword was strange and sharp, not inferior to Wang Lu's primal chaos heaven-splitting sword qi. The purity of the sword intent seemed to be above Wang Lu's. After all, Wang Lu was good at both offense and defense, so the pure sword intent in full attack mode was still a bit worse. Wang Lu didn't think that he was invincible in the world. Right now, he was merely in the king pill stage. There were countless sword cultivators in 9 regions who were more powerful than him, but there were not too many who could make that sword strike just now. And in his impression, with a slight tremble, Wang Lu saw a figure flash in front of him. A rainbow-like gorgeous figure of a girl appeared behind Zhang Liming's body, holding a starlight immortal sword that had just been washed clean of blood. The girl had delicate long hair, a bright and picturesque face, and a pair of sparkling eyes filled with endless curiosity about everything in the world. Seeing this face, Wang Lu almost fainted. He had calculated every possible way not to expose himself, especially not to be discovered by his fellow sect members. Unexpectedly, the person in front of him was someone he had been familiar with for many years. "Senior brother Wang Lu, how come it's you?" The girl named Luli blinked her eyes in disbelief at first, and then with a cheer, she threw herself at him like a swallow flying into the forest. Wang Lu's heart tightened. He immediately dodged backward and then pretended that he didn't know her. Men and women should not touch each other. "Benefactor, please show some respect." Huh. Luli curiously tilted her head, looked at Wang Lu, and then raised her head to think seriously. Finally, the girl clapped her hands and suddenly realized something. Then, Luli meticulously gave Wang Lu a salute and righteously said, "Luli pays respect to senior brother Wang Lu." "Hey, I don't want this kind of respect from you," Wang Lu said. "I think you probably mistook me for someone else." "Huh?" Luli looked incredulous as she covered her mouth, completely unable to accept the reality. Wang Lu coughed. "Perhaps I look similar to your senior brother. But as the saying goes, there must be 3 people with the same appearance in this world. So, you actually mistook me for someone else. My surname is Zhang Fan, and I'm a loose cultivator from the Southern Heaven region." Luli was stunned, and then, as if suddenly enlightened, She nodded and cautiously came closer. I know, senior brother, you're carrying out a secret mission, right? Luli will keep it a secret. Rest assured. Secret. Counting on Luli to keep it a secret was second only to counting on Wang Wu to be an upright person. Wang Lu sighed and casually asked, if someone asks you who you saw in Busy Mountain Town, how would you answer? Secret. What secret? A secret that can't be told. Wang Lu raised his eyebrows. Not bad, I haven't seen you for several months and you've made progress. Alright, let's exchange moves. Liuli, keeping a secret is a very important and difficult thing. I'm afraid you can't do it alone. I'm willing to help you keep the secret. Alright, but you have to tell me what the secret is first, then I can help you keep it. Oh, the secret is that I've seen senior brother Wang Lu. You mustn't tell anyone. Wang Lu sneered helplessly. Chapter 542. Luli's problem was really difficult to solve. Because of some reasons that were inconvenient to be pointed out directly out of politeness, it was simply a fantasy to expect this child to keep the secret. Wang Lu had trained her for many years, and at present, there was only one way that could make Luli keep the secret. Silence the witness. Of course, this trick was not feasible at all. No matter how crazy Wang Lu was, it was impossible for him to lay his hands on little Luli. However, he couldn't just leave her alone. Otherwise, it wouldn't be long before the entire Lingjian school knew that he had come back. And he was not ready to go back to the mountain. The problem seemed to be in a deadlock, but if the problem could not be solved in a positive way, the reverse solution would also be the same. Since Luli could not keep the secret, then Luli would also become a part of the secret. In short, wouldn't it be fine as long as Luli didn't return to the mountain? However, before that, he had to figure out why Luli came to Mtmang City. Master asked me to come. Uncle Zhou, what did he ask you to come for? Luli took out a piece of paper and read it word by word. Slay the demon, uphold justice, and contribute to the development of the just cause of Wanxian League. What did he tell you in private? Luli said with a smile. He told me to hunt down a cultivator of blood refining sect, and then take his token back to Plentiful City to receive the reward as my experiential learning. Oh, bounty hunter? Wang Lu immediately understood. This was the bounty hunting order issued by the Plentiful City Management Committee. Since the rise of Plentiful City, the Southern Heaven region could be said to be a gathering of winds and clouds, dragons and snakes mixed together. Needless to say, super sects like Shangjing sect and Lingjian school, even some cultivators from lower rank sects had come to the Southern Heaven region to look for gold. However, with more people came more trouble. Many evil cultivators took the opportunity to fish in troubled waters and stir up trouble. This young cultivator from blood refining sect was one of them. Nowadays, although righteous cultivators were the mainstream in 9 regions, the number of evil cultivators was also quite large. Although the upper echelons of Plentiful City's management committee were powerful, it was impossible for them to take care of everything. Therefore, the usual way to deal with evil cultivators around Plentiful City was to issue bounty hunting orders and hire civilian experts with a high reward to hunt them down. In any case, although Plentiful City's human resources were tight, it never lacked money. As soon as the bounty hunting order was issued, many lively civilian organizations sprang up like bamboo shoots after a spring rain. Yes, last month, they just held a gathering and went to the non-phase peak to lay a wreath for you. Lay a wreath? Luli nodded. Yes, there are also a lot of magical tools, magical treasures, spirit stones, and so on. They said that it's used to express their grief. The more precious the gift, the more sincere the grief. That day, I also went and brought you a bag of Flying Red Cloud's candy. Really loyal. Knowing that Flying Red Cloud candy bun was Luli's favorite food in recent times, Wang Lu touched Luli's head, which made the girl particularly pleased. He then asked, "Is this my master's idea?" Yes, it was proposed by Fifth Aunt. She said that you're the lead disciple of Spirit Sword sect, so everyone should express their gratitude. Although I didn't quite understand what she meant, after she proposed it, The atmosphere on the mountain became heavy for several days. Wang Lu sneered. Wang Wu, don't let me catch you when I go back. However, on the other hand, since Wang Wu, that scoundrel, had the leisure to do this kind of thing, she probably really believed that nothing would happen to him. Speaking of which, the trust between master and disciple was really touching. Very well, in short, basically nothing big happened in the sect, so it's not bad. Next, Wang Lu touched Lu Li's head again. Do you want to play with me for 2 days? Okay. Lu Li was elated and then summoned her flying sword. How do you want to play? In the past, when they were on the mountain, the most common entertainment for the two was sword fight. Because until Wang Lu advanced to the King Pill, his and Lu Li's cultivation base was almost the same, and the gap in their comprehensive strength was also negligible. It could be said that they were evenly matched, and after every sword fight, they benefited a lot from each other. Now, although Wang Lu had a fortuitous encounter to advance to the King Pill first, so his strength was one step ahead, but that sword fight also showed that during this period of time, Lu Li's cultivation base had also advanced by leaps and bounds, so she wasn't left too far behind and was still at the same level as Wang Lu. Wang Lu's heart was moved, secretly thinking that sword fight with Lu Li was actually a good idea. Right now, whether it was shrinking or fusing, actual combat experience was an excellent catalyst. Especially since Lu Li's brilliant heart sword intent was even purer than his, it was the most suitable to temper himself in actual combat. However, just as Wang Lu was about to nod his head, suddenly, the King Pill in his jade mansion trembled, as if it had a vague reaction with something. A moment later, a flash of light flew over from the horizon like lightning. A long-haired elegant sword cultivator floated down, and as soon as he landed, he cupped his hands in salute. I am Qi Xianying, disciple of Red Pine Mountain's reaching Firmament Palace. Greetings, fellow Taoist. Wang Lu looked at him, but he didn't hurry to return the salute. Instead, there was a bit of banter in his eyes. The Red Pine Mountain's reaching Firmament Palace was a famous high-rank sect in 9 regions, second only to the 5 uniques. Its headquarters was located in the Southern Heaven region, but it had branches in other regions. Its influence in the entire continent was even above that of Lingjian School, and Qi Xianying was the current lead disciple of reaching Firmament Palace. He had been cultivating for 50 years, and his cultivation base was at the peak of King Pill, which could be said to be powerful. Under the tacit approval of his sect, he had managed a considerable force, which was quite famous in the Southern Heaven region. Therefore, many people no longer regarded him as a disciple, but as a local tyrant. A year ago, when he met with the lead disciple of Shangjing's sect, Chonghua, he was neither servile nor overbearing, and even had a pleasant conversation. After that conversation, Qi Xianying's reputation became even more prominent, so much so that even Wang Lu had heard of his name. However, this was actually not the point. Let alone a mere lead disciple of reaching Firmament Palace, even if Chonghua herself was here, Wang Lu was too lazy to even look at her. It was really the purpose of this Qi Xianying's visit that made Wang Lu feel a little ridiculous. Because it was ridiculous, he unceremoniously laughed. This laughter made Qi Xianying somewhat inexplicable and somewhat annoyed. In his opinion, his manners were already there, but the lead disciple of Lingjian School was unexpectedly rude. Fellow Taoist, you, Wang Lu unceremoniously interrupted him. Don't pretend. What are you thinking? Do you think I can't see through it? This Mt Meng is the famous Blind Mountain, and it has been many years since a cultivator came here. Zheng Liming came here specifically to escape. I am just taking things as they come. Lu Li is here for Zheng Liming, and you, what are you doing here? Qi Xianying frowned and opened his mouth. Before he could finish his words, he was interrupted. You are the lead disciple of reaching Firmament Palace, so you don't have the time to come here for an outing. Zheng Liming is just a +6 peak Shudan, far from being qualified for you. A +8 peak King Pill. So don't tell me you came here for me. Upon hearing this, Qi Xianying finally understood the meaning of Wang Lu's words. Thinking of the consistent and almost unreasonable strong style of this lead disciple of Spirit Sword sect, he could only sigh. Yes, I did come here for junior sister Lu Li. Wang Lu nodded. Then you can go now. Qi Xianying somewhat incredulously stared at Wang Lu, but found that the other party's eyes were unusually calm and seemed to be serious. Chapter 543. Facing Wang Lu, Qi Xianying felt an unprecedented irritation. He had been cultivating for 50 years and had seen all kinds of people. Even the aloof Chonghua fairy could talk and laugh with him, but he had never seen a person like Wang Lu. No wonder in the circle, Wang Lu's reputation was the most controversial. However, this was not necessarily a bad opportunity. The meeting between the lead disciple of Reaching Firmament Palace and the lead disciple of Spirit Sword Sect would certainly attract a lot of attention in the Wanxian League. At that time, the performance of both sides would be seen by others. One side was crafty and rude, while the other side was courteous. The difference between them was obvious. Qi Xianying would not deliberately use others to build his own influence, but if he could conveniently do it, he would never refuse. Living in the shadow of the five uniques, a top-rank sect must have its own way of survival. In the face of Wang Lu's aggressive attitude, Qi Xianying stabilized his footing and was ready to insist that all this was a misunderstanding. However, when his eyes fell on Lu Li's contented face, which was touched by Wang Lu, his heart was moved. Misunderstanding? Hey, in Plentiful City, people with discerning eyes would know that this was not a misunderstanding. A few months ago, when I met Lu Li in Plentiful City, I was amazed by her. This matter was almost known to everyone in the circle. If I insist that it was a misunderstanding again and again, it would be nothing more than deceiving myself. Moreover, wouldn't that mean that in front of the lead disciple of Spirit Sword Sect, the lead disciple of Reaching Firmament Palace wouldn't even have the courage to tell the truth? It's not like it's something immoral. Both of us are free. I, Qi Xianying, am pursuing her openly. What's so shameful about it? At this time, even if I tell the truth, so what? You, Wang Lu, are just her senior brother, not her Taoist companion. How could you care that much? Therefore, Qi Xianying calmed his eyes and said with a smile, Junior sister Lu Li is innocent and kind, and her grace is outstanding. I do love her. I'm not interested in what you think. Wang Lu interrupted. Lu Li has already been contracted by me. You go find other people to love her. Your Excellency really likes to joke. People are not goods just because you say contracted. Wang Lu sneered and said, so what if I'm contracted? You can sue me. Qi Xianying said, don't you think that such a declaration is too domineering and doesn't respect the subjective will of the parties involved? Subjective will? What a joke. Wang Lu shook his head and then asked Lu Li, tell me in your opinion what kind of character is this Qi Xianying? Lu Li turned around and looked at Qi Xianying. The latter smiled and nodded in a generous manner. Senior brother Qi is a good person. Wang Lu laughed and said, did you hear that? Keep the good guy card and leave. With that, Wang Lu glanced at him as if he was looking at an idiot, then pulled Lu Li's hand and turned around to leave. This? Qi Xianying refused to give up. In fact, he was somewhat encouraged. He didn't have a long contact with Lu Li, but she was a good person. Obviously, it meant that he had left a good impression on her. And if it could continue to develop, of course, with Wang Lu around, things would not go so smoothly, which he had expected a few months ago. At that time, the news of the disappearance of the lead disciple of Spirit Sword Sect had just spread in the circle, and it just so happened that he began to try to get in touch with Lu Li. Thus, someone around him said that if he made a move against Lu Li at this time, he would be suspected of taking advantage of her. However, Qi Xianying retorted that not only did Wang Lu and Lu Li not have a marriage agreement, they didn't even have any love between man and woman. Even if Wang Lu was still there, he didn't avoid it, so he couldn't take advantage of her. Having said that, in fact, Qi Xianying had already expected that if Wang Lu really disappeared, then that would be fine. But once he came back, he would inevitably become an obstacle in front of Lu Li. He and Lu Li were indeed not in a romantic relationship, at least not yet. According to his private understanding from the people of Beastmaster School, the relationship between the two was more like a master-servant relationship. But in fact, this kind of relationship was even worse. Qi Xianying had cultivated for 50 years, and he had seen too many emotional things. Most of the obstacles did not come from the two people who loved each other, but from the family behind the two people. And no matter how he looked at it, Wang Lu's performance was like a tricky and unreasonable mother-in-law. Seeing that Wang Lu was about to take Lu Li away, Qi Xianying hurriedly shouted, Fellow Taoist, please wait. Although this move was reckless, it was also Qi Xianying's last resort. If he really let Wang Lu go like this, he would never see Lu Li again. In his 50 years of cultivation, this was the first time that he was moved by a woman. If things were to go down the drain like this, perhaps it would form a heart demon that could not be dispelled for decades. Therefore, even if it would make Wang Lu feel disgusted, he couldn't care less. Who knew that Wang Lu's reaction was bigger than he expected? He did stop, but when he turned his head, a sharp sword qi that shook Qi Xianying's primordial spirit came at him. At this moment, Qi Xianying's strength as the lead disciple of Reaching Firmament Palace fully erupted. Purple qi lingered in his jade mansion, and the king pill that had been tempered to its peak state was fully sublimated under the brewing of the purple qi, condensing into an indeterminate little person. However, although he lost in cultivation, he couldn't lose in emotional matters. Qi Xianying clenched his teeth and earnestly pleaded, "In terms of cultivation, perhaps I have no hope to compare with you in this life, but I still hope that you can give me a chance." Wang Lu was shocked, thinking, "This kid's face is so thick that it defies the heaven." Just now, he was beaten to the point that he almost spat out his *T. But now, he actually turned around and put on a posture of proposing marriage to his father-in-law? "You," Wang Lu tentatively asked, "just now when I drove the sword qi with Skybreaker, did I accidentally hurt your brain?" "No, I'm very sober, I'm serious." Qi Xianying's eyes were shining. "You serious?" Wang Lu suddenly pondered, glanced at Qi Xianying from the corner of his eyes, and more felt that his sword strike just now might have caused some irreparable loss of IQ. Thinking that the other party didn't make any big mistake from the beginning to the end, he couldn't help but feel that he should compensate the other party. However, the other party was thinking about Lu Li, so he couldn't just compensate him with little Lu Li, right? After thinking about it, he could only, "How about this? I have an ancestral meat lingji mushroom here. I'll give it to you." Chapter 544. Qi Xianying looked at the so-called flesh lingji mushroom handed over by Wang Lu with great sincerity and confusion, and inwardly guessed what this thing was for. But soon he changed his mind and no longer thought about these chores. Business was more important. "Senior brother Wang Lu, with all due respect," Qi Xianying said, "your strength, intelligence, and temperament are the best among your peers, and you and junior sister Lu Li have a foundation of affection. If I compete with you, you don't need to open your mouth, and I will not overestimate myself. However, since you have no intention to become junior sister Lu Li's Taoist companion, and even don't have much affection between a man and a woman, then, I hope you can give me a chance." Wang Lu was stunned. He was not surprised by the other party's thick face, but by the other party's explanation. There was not much affection between a man and a woman, which was actually true. Although he doted on Lu Li, at least until today, he had never thought about becoming Lu Li's Taoist companion. Of course, having no idea at present did not mean that he could let it go at will. First, as a senior brother, he had the obligation to take care of Lu Li so that she would not be deceived by scoundrels. Second, resources could be reserved. It was just that this was just his own thought. In the eyes of outsiders, it might not necessarily be so. He had also heard a lot of rumors about him and Lu Li. How could Qi Xianying be so confident that he had no idea about Lu Li at present? "Because I can see a person's marriage and love fate," Qi Xianying replied. "Marriage and love fate?" Qi Xianying somewhat helplessly said. This is one of the special skills of Red Pine Mountain's Reaching Firmament Palace. However, Reaching Firmament Palace is a small sect, probably not in senior brother Wang Lu's eyes. One of the core methods of our sect is to observe the cause and effect between people. And among them, marriage and love fate are the areas that we are best at. Wang Lu really didn't pay much attention to the method of Reaching Firmament Palace before. Listening to Qi Xianying's explanation, he reasonably speculated, in other words, it's pimping? Qi Xianying couldn't catch his breath. At the same time, He was considering whether he should fight to the death with the other party for the honor of his sect. It was just that, thinking about the sword strike that scattered his Yuanying, Qi Xianying really couldn't bring himself to fight for a short time, so he continued to explain softly. In my opinion, the lines of marriage and love between people are real. The so-called marriage fate line refers to who one is legally fated to marry. Because the rights and laws affect the mysteries of heaven and earth, they are usually clear and distinguishable. For example, senior brother Wang Lu does not have any marriage fate line on you. The two of them have already forged a deep friendship, so I can't allow you to step in. Qi Xianying was so shocked that he felt as if stars were shining before his eyes. This is impossible, Wang Lu said. Since you can see the love line, you should be able to see the strong feelings of Luli. Qi Xianying gawked and then carefully looked. Indeed, he could see that Luli was involved in the love line of countless people. It was just that, most of them were involved in a distance that could not be seen by his eyes, so whether it belonged to Zhu Shiyao or not was not clear. Moreover, the key issue was not this. Isn't Zhu Shiyao a woman? Wang Lu blinked. So what if she's a woman? Haven't you heard of Lily? Lily? In short, it's a beautiful lesbian. Actually, Luli also likes women. That's impossible. Why is it impossible? If it weren't because she likes women, do you think she would have such a faint feeling for me? With my peerless aptitude, I'm afraid there's no woman who wouldn't be tempted by me. Qi Xianying had no time to refute this incredibly thick-skinned statement. His mind was still immersed in the Lily theory. A relationship between a woman and a woman, this is simply absurd. Wang Lu said, what's so absurd about it? Although they are both women, they are, after all, human beings. There's a beast master school in your southern heaven region, where many people even play with spirit beasts. What do you say about this? Qi Xianying suddenly felt ashamed that Reaching Firmament Palace and Beastmaster School were both immortal cultivation sects in the Southern Heaven region. So no matter how sincere and touching your love is, I can only tell you that you've found the wrong person. Sister Luli is already taken. You're young and your cultivation base is not bad. You still have a great future ahead of you, so there's no need to hang yourself on this tree. If you want a partner, I can introduce you to the beauties of Yin and Yang School. Qi Xianying helplessly smiled and didn't answer. The beauties of Yin and Yang School were indeed good. It was unknown how many male cultivators in the Wanxian League dreamed of winning their favor. However, the vision of the lead disciple of Reaching Firmament Palace was different from others. Moreover, for him, if it wasn't Luli, anyone else was meaningless. I understand, but I will not give up, Qi Xianying said in a deep voice. His tone was very firm. For this declaration, Wang Lu didn't take it to heart at all. The so-called not giving up was nothing more than an expression. With that big killer Lily, how could he not give up? If you have the ability, go and do a transformation surgery for me. Then let's wait and see. Today I'll take my leave first. By the way, after you go back, remember not to spread the news that I'm together with Luli. Wang Lu unceremoniously put forward his request. Got it. With that, Qi Xianying turned around and left. Looking at Qi Xianying's receding figure, Wang Lu knew that he had finally solved this not-so-big problem. However, thinking about the marriage line that he just showed, Wang Lu always felt that he seemed to have ignored something. Oh, by the way, he actually forgot to take the flesh Ganoderma. Such a good prop, but he didn't care about it. Is he really going to do a transformation surgery? After sending away Qi Xianying and ending this episode, Wang Lu was finally able to live a comfortable life with Luli as planned. For Wang Lu, since the little angel Luli had come, it was impossible for him to let her go. The bounty hunting task assigned to her by the Plentiful City Committee was directly confirmed by Wang Lu, using his committee members' authority. Thus, Luli instantly became a free person. Together with Wang Lu, she left Mount Meng and went all the way to a more desolate and remote place. Mount Meng was, after all, not a place for cultivation. For Wang Lu, who had basically adapted to the King Pill stage, it was fine. However, Luli's brilliant sword heart physique particularly rejected this kind of blind spot of surrounding spiritual energy, so she could not cultivate here. The two of them traveled aimlessly in the southern heaven region. Sometimes they crossed mountains and ridges, sometimes they enjoyed the delicious food in the bustling city, and then they had a sword duel every few days. Their days were very pleasant. In the blink of an eye, 2 months had passed. Wang Lu's King Pill stage had finally been completely stabilized, and the fusion of non-phase method and primal chaos heaven-splitting sword chi had also reached a small success. The progress was even faster than the initial plan, and Lu Li's contribution couldn't go unnoticed. With or without a sparring partner, the efficiency was completely different. However, the real role of Lu Li was not just a good sparring partner. Compared to the harvest and cultivation, the change in Wang Lu's stage was more important. After 2 months of comfortable life, he finally walked out of the tragic dream of transmigration and found the direction of his future. Senior brother, are we still not going back to the mountain? While eating, Lu Li somewhat hesitantly asked, "We've been away from the mountain for so long. Wouldn't Master be worried?" Rest assured, if they were really worried, they would have already come to look for people. Do you think the elders of Heavenly Sword Hall would really feel relieved to send you to Plentiful City as a bounty hunter? Huh. Lu Li was somewhat puzzled. Wang Lu didn't explain too much. While eating, he said to Lu Li, "In 2 days, let's go back to Plentiful City." You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.